If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this.
Paranormal investigators and explorers of the abandoned, what is the scariest paranormal haunted place you've been to? And what did you encounter?
What did I witness? My family owned property in western Pennsylvania, close to the point where PA, West Virginia, and Maryland all connect. The area was extremely rural, nestled in the Allegheny Mountains. The property was large, with a cabin set back in the woods behind a large pasture. My cousins and I would play in the pastures all the way into the night, and when the hay was high, we would hide from our parents there because we thought it was funny. Kids being kids. One night in mid to late summer, my two cousins and I were doing the exact things mentioned above. For anyone who has lived in wide open rural areas, a clear sky and full moon at night can provide a lot of nocturnal visibility. This night happened to be one of those. We were hiding in the hay about 300 yards from the house when we all heard heavy rustling. The area is known for its bears, so I kneeled up over the hay to see what was around me. About 50 feet from me, something bipedal began to stand up. At first I thought it was another person, but this thing was tall. The hay was at least 3.5 feet high, and it towered over it, much larger than a human. Its shoulders were very broad, but the body was strangely skinny, its head proportionate to its shoulders. I was too far away to see any facial details. The scariest part about it all is after it stood up to its full height, it turned and ran away, but not like anything I've ever seen. It basically glided as it ran, covering 300 to 400 yards of pasture in about 5 seconds. The whole energy of this thing just screamed predator. This image has been burned into my brain for almost 20 years now, and the memory is still as clear as when it happened. As I sit here writing this, I still get chills and goosebumps just thinking about it. I have not communicated with my cousins in many years, yet they also witnessed the event. We saw something, of course, but our parents and pretty much everyone else I told didn't believe me. Am I crazy, or do any of you have a similar experience or perhaps an idea of what we saw? In June 2023 I had to move back in with my dad. On my first Sunday back I had a horrible nightmare. In it, a demon was hunting people chosen seemingly at random. When it picked a target, it would mimic their form and voice to taunt them as it did everything it could to terrify the chosen victim. After scaring them to its satisfaction, it would possess them, get them into a more secluded area, leave their bodies, chase them deeper into the chosen location, and end them in some horrifying way. I saw this happen to hundreds of people throughout the nightmare. The last one was a woman. Mid-20s, about 5 feet 2 inches, wavy blonde hair to her shoulders, blue eyes, wearing a denim jacket and white skirt about halfway to her knees. The demon came to her home and began to single her out in front of her friends. When it possessed her, it walked her into an abandoned, dilapidated factory. Her friends tried to get her back up some stairs when the demon reached out a clawed hand from her back to stab a man who grabbed her arm and tried to pull her back up. The others ran away. When she was alone in the basement, the demon left her body and began chasing her further inside. After at least an hour, she stood in front of a gaping hole in the floor about 8 feet deep and stared inside. The demon sneaked up and shoved her in. When she landed at the bottom, she raced to her feet to see the demon looking like her, staring down with a sadistic grin for a few minutes before walking away, leaving her to beg for help alone in the darkness where nobody would ever find her. At this point I woke up. It was about 5 a.m., and about 3 feet away I heard my own heavy breathing, but it wasn't me. Nobody was there, yet I heard it, followed by stomping footsteps going through my bedroom door and toward the basement. The door was still locked as I left it. Last night I went on a tour of the old Charleston Jail in Charleston, South Carolina. This jail is considered to be the most haunted in the state, operating from 1802 to 1939. I was completely fine leading up, I was pretty excited actually. When we walked in I felt uneasy, but nothing insane. The minute we walked up the steps, I started feeling the heaviest weight on my chest. I think I felt sad? Or could I just feel its presence so deeply? I am an extremely empathetic and emotional person. I quickly started to feel nauseous and dizzy. I pass out frequently, but it always has to do with the sight of blood or me being in pain. I don't just pass out randomly for no reason. Within 5 minutes of the tour, I was walking out the door on the verge of passing out. Since I know this feeling all too well, I knew I only had seconds before I would drop. But that's not what happened. My body went numb, my hearing went to ringing, I got tunnel vision, and all the normal stuff happened, yet I never passed out. I just stayed this way for at least 3 minutes. It was actually starting to make me mad because either pass out or don't, lol. The second I laid down, I was immediately fine. I hopped up and went back into the tour. Within seconds of walking into the room, my throat started burning. The guide hadn't even told the story yet. Lavinia Fisher, serial killer, was sentenced to death by hanging. She ended up throwing herself off the platform as to not allow the city control over her death. These may seem simple to many, but I've never been anywhere haunted before. What really got me was the semi-fainting. I've never experienced that, especially since it was completely random. Then the throat burning immediately after coming back? Her story was insane, and I had no prior knowledge. Any thoughts? Is this a normal experience? Has anyone else been to old Charleston Jail before? The ghost of Oxford Milford Road. When Brad Culp was a student at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, there was a rumor that the town was one of the most haunted places in America. When Culp started an on-campus magazine, he couldn't wait to write about several of the area's most famous phantoms. Not long after his story was published, though, he kept finding himself thinking about one ghost in particular, the ghost of Oxford Milford Road. As the story goes, many decades ago, probably sometime in the 1940s, there was a young man courting a young woman in a rural part of town. Because the woman's parents didn't approve of the match, each night he visited under the cover of darkness. After her parents went to bed, the young woman would sneak out of her farmhouse and flash the lights of her parents' car 3 times. Then her young suitor would ride his motorcycle down the road. One night, he took the turn a little too sharply right before her house, says Culp. The motorcycle went one way, he went the other. His injuries were so severe that he did not survive. Rumor has it, however, that his love-struck ghost still haunts this stretch of Milford Road. Curious about the tale, Culp, his girlfriend, now his wife, and a friend decided to go out there one night to see if they could verify it. His girlfriend was worried she'd be completely freaked out. She believes more in that stuff than I do, Culp says. But he was mostly concerned that his suspicions, that none of this was actually true, would be confirmed. On this particular night, as Culp passed the abandoned farm, an idea came to him, and he pitched it to his girlfriend. How could she not say yes? Though reluctant, she relented, and Culp turned a short way into the farmhouse driveway. He killed the engine and flashed his lights 3 times. No joke, there was a single headlight that appeared 3/4 of a mile down the road, Culp says. You saw it start to come, going pretty slow. It kept coming and coming. My wife was freaking out. It was coming closer and closer. As a collision seemed imminent, Culp turned on his car's lights. He expected to see a kid on a bike, bailing out from his prank now that he'd been caught. But there's nothing there. The light is just gone, he says. They got out of the car. They walked around, trying to figure out what it was they could have seen. To this day, we still talk about it. I saw something I cannot explain, he says. If you get him and his wife around a campfire, they'll swear up and down that the story is true. And if you're ever in Oxford, Ohio, consider parking for just a few minutes on Oxford Milford Road at night to test your nerve. When I was younger, my parents and I used to visit my grandparents' Lakehouse in Sweden often. It was relatively isolated with many streams and dense woods, with no visible or audible neighbors around. And it was at least a 30-minute drive from civilization. Growing up in Europe with Swedish grandparents, I'd heard all about the fairies and trolls under bridges and all the other stories, but I was old enough at this point to no longer believe in those things. I'd often go off into the woods searching for slugs, bugs, and other animals and plants that interested me. I used creeks, large rocks, and other POIs to guide my way to and from the lake house. This one particular spring I came across a small bridge crossing a seasonal creek. Mind you, I no longer believed in trolls that hide under bridges, but just in case, I decided to check the bridge before crossing it. So I walked alongside the bridge and peeked underneath. All was clear apart from a hole underneath one of the sides. It was big enough for me to squeeze through if I had wanted to, but it would have been a tight fit. I don't know why, but I felt ever so compelled to just stare at it while also feeling an intense sense of get the duck out of here energy. So I did, and once I was able to peel my gaze away, I set off back to the lake house. From then on I stayed away from that area, and any other bridges I came across in the forest I made sure to never cross. My father used to take me and my sisters out spooking late nights on weekends. We'd go out through the country looking at abandoned houses, etc. Well, one night we decided to go to Hell's Gate. It's an old train bridge. Well, one of the stories says if you drive into the middle of the bridge and flash your lights 3 times, cut them off, and sit there for a few minutes, you'll hear kids giggling. So we did that, nothing happened. So my dad decided to turn the lights back on and drive through and turn around so we could leave. Well, we got about halfway through again, and the car died. It was in perfect condition, so my dad tried to turn the car back on, the lights flickered, and there was a rope hanging down in the opening of the tunnel, which of course scared us. My dad finally got the car going, and we drove off. The next stop was an old house. We pulled in the drive, nothing really happened. Then as we were driving away, my dad says he heard me let out the loudest scream I'd ever let out before, pure terror. Apparently I told them I saw an evil face in the back window of the car. It scared me so bad that I came up over the front seat and hid under a blanket we had in the car. My cousin and sister were in the back seat and said they felt someone hitting the underside of the car. Ever since then I've had a black figure that's been in my dreams, usually staying in the background but still there. Any idea? I've lived in 3 haunted homes here in Oklahoma. The homes were located in Geary, Yukon, and El Reno, Oklahoma. I wonder if anyone has any stories to tell that may be similar. 1. Yukon. This home was frequently inhabited by physical spirits. Things would constantly move on their own. You could walk past a chair, kids' toys, or anything that a human uses, such as a wall phone, and the items would move at random. My brother had a toddler's tricycle, cliché, I know, and it would cycle by itself in the home. We would come home and find the house looking ransacked quite a bit, and there was no break-in or anything missing. A few times the washer and dryer both had been disconnected and moved into the kitchen area on their own after a 5-minute trip to the convenience store. There was an apparition of a little girl that would want to play with us kids, and she would only show up occasionally at nighttime. We constantly heard disembodied voices and knocking throughout the home. Usually the knocking happened in the master bedroom and living room. 2. Geary. This home was built in 1975 and was bought by my mother and her ex-husband around 2009 and had one previous owner. This home was mainly haunted by a playful spirit. TVs would shut themselves off, lights would turn off and on by themselves, and occasionally things would fall off of a shelf or out of a cabinet. This home wasn't very active. 3. El Reno. I rented this home for about a year. It was built around 1950 as a duplex home but was restored into a single home by the time I rented it. This home was very active, like the first location. This home had shadow people and violent happenings. Doors would slam shut. There were numerous unexplained noises, including the breaking of glass and the sound of heavy footsteps running through the house. I saw many shadow beings while living there. Mostly in the master bedroom. One night, I was home watching TV when I heard what sounded like a brick being thrown through the bay window, immediately followed by the sound of footsteps. I ran outside onto the porch and dialed 911. The police cleared the home and found nothing. I looked for myself, and there was not any broken glass, no forced entry, and nothing out of place. I had recurring sleep paralysis while living here as well. This home scared me the most. Once I went to these haunted mansions that used to be a school until it got shut down, and now part of the property is used for weddings and Halloween haunted houses. Anywho, my husband and I went through the regular Halloween haunted houses on site, and then the last building we were going through was actually haunted. We were walked through a pitch-black schoolhouse, told stories about ghost sightings, and given permission to take flash pictures to see if we could get anything. Which we did and didn't capture anything paranormal. The last part of the tour went into the basement of this building. While everyone else walked right down the stairs, I got the worst, hair standing up on the back of my neck, pressure on my chest and throat, and a suffocating, paralyzing feeling. I instantly stopped my husband from going down the stairs and told him I wanted to leave. He was bummed because he wanted to see what was going on down there, but he left with me. On the way out we heard a guide say to someone else that people in the basement couldn't come back up until they were cleansed and allowed to leave. That convinced my husband that we probably didn't actually want to go downstairs after all. Ha ha. A few months later we are flipping through channels and land on Ghost Adventures Indiana, the exact place we were, and they were told by employees that people were having seizures and passing out on the property and that years before, there had been unexplained deaths. I don't necessarily think Ghost Adventures is 100% real, but I felt the same things they felt during their investigation, so I feel like this episode was legit. I guess management set the basement up the same way that they found evidence of a real seance to capture the history of the building. They even went to the extent of staging simulated seances in the same room to heighten the eerie atmosphere for Halloween. I was supposed to show a house when I worked as a realtor 28 years ago. The client was a no-show, so I decided to go in and take a look around myself. The house was vacant, but boxes and evidence of packing were all around. As soon as I walked in, I felt so uneasy. It was a feeling I had never experienced before or since. When I first opened the door, I called to make sure no one was there. There was a light upstairs, but I found myself scared to even direct my gaze that way. To my left was a round room, very cool design, with various rooms off of it, including the kitchen, which I could see from my standpoint was under some construction. As I stood at the entryway to the round central room, which was only a few steps from the front door, which I left open, I was frozen with an inexplicable fear of stepping into the room. So while I'm having an inner dialogue with myself saying, "What is wrong with you? Just go in. Why are you scared?" My eyes are glancing around the round room at the boxes and stuff just piled up, and then I see it. Something I didn't even know existed. A full-size, bona fide Ouija board. It was made of solid wood, likely about 2 square feet in size, rather than Hasbro cardboard. Just up against some boxes. This was long before the internet. So the only knowledge I had of Ouija boards was having the game as a child, during which we never experienced anything paranormal. Whatever I saw in movies gave me the basics, so I knew that my fear had justifications. Needless to say, I quickly left the place. I used to rent a townhouse with an old boyfriend that had been converted from army barracks. The townhouse was obviously older, but it had 2 stories and had been renovated on the main and top floors. The basement contained the washer and dryer, however, it was otherwise an unfinished concrete space that was fairly large but not in great shape, with the door to the basement located in the kitchen. At the time I had a Chihuahua cross who was extremely vocal and protective of me, as many Chihuahuas are. If the door to the basement was open, my dog would have all her hackles up, growling and freaking out at the door to the basement to the point spit would fly out of her mouth like a rabid animal, and she refused to get too close. If the door was closed, she was fine, she just didn't really like to be too close to the door. Okay, weird quirky Chihuahua things. I'd laugh it off, but I was definitely uncomfortable every time I went downstairs to switch laundry over, and my dog would have an absolute freakout every time I went in the basement. She would remain in the kitchen, whining, barking, pacing, and shaking until I returned upstairs, after which she would growl at the door again until I closed it. I tried taking her down into the basement with me to do laundry a few times, both to try desensitizing her to the basement and to make me feel better being down there, but it was no use. She would tuck tail, freak out, and run back upstairs. I just decided my dog hated basements, but her antics did make me more nervous of the area. Fast forward a couple months and we rescue a kitten. Now the kitten's favorite spot in the whole house is the basement. She's running around down there, jumping and catching/chasing dust particles while I'm doing laundry. Great, now I have a laundry buddy to make the room less creepy. I have to physically remove her from the basement when I'm done doing laundry, though, as she wanted to stay, but the door had to be shut so the dog would calm down. A few months later, a couple of my boyfriend's friends experienced a traumatic incident at their home and stayed with us for a month. We had one extra bedroom, so one person stayed on the top floor, and the other set up a whole space in the basement to stay, as we only used it for laundry. They started complaining about being woken up around 3 a.m. every morning by a sound that sounded like someone ringing a bell. He said that the sound would ring, wake him up, and then stop, allowing him to get back to sleep. Weird, but it's a townhouse, so we have neighbors on each side. Maybe it's an alarm someone has set. They stay a month and move out, but one of the guys ends up moving into the same complex, just in one of the other sets of buildings. One night he texts my boyfriend and asks who we are babysitting. We weren't, so we were confused. He said he just walked by our place, looked in the window as he was walking past, and said he saw a little girl sitting on the back of our couch, like perched up on the top part of the couch looking out the window. Creepy as duck, but I take it with a grain of salt, as this friend was a bit of an exaggerator, and he knew about the quirky things already with the basement. Shortly after that we began looking at other rentals, as our lease is about to end, and we don't love how much our neighbors love to party. As soon as we let our landlord know that we found a new place and will be leaving after the lease is up, weird things started happening. For that last month, we'd come home from work to find a cupboard door had just fallen off in the kitchen. Fixing it, a couple days later, the cupboard door in the bathroom fell off. Then a different cabinet door in the kitchen, and then the last week we were there, we were sitting in the living room on the couch watching TV among the packed boxes, and the living room light switch, the actual light switch, starts on fire. If we weren't right there, we wouldn't have noticed. We got it out immediately, and the landlord called in an emergency electrician. We moved shortly after. My dog was never afraid of another basement in her life. In 2002, my oldest brother and I took a road trip from Seattle to Las Vegas. After we had the Vegas experience, we started making our way back north. We ended up staying in an Old West hotel just outside of Vegas that had just reopened the day after massive renovations. We were the first guests to check in. I cannot, for the life of me, remember the name of the hotel, but it was old-fashioned and Old West themed. We checked in and went to our room. We decided to explore the hotel because we weren't tired and were bored. As we walked around, the atmosphere was heavy, almost oppressive. Multiple times both my brother and I would turn to look behind us because we both felt like we were being watched and followed, but of course, there was no one there. We went down to the basement to see the old ballroom that the clerk had been so excited about. I'll never know what the clerk was excited about, but as soon as we entered, the feeling of close scrutiny intensified. We both took just 3 or 4 steps into the ballroom before looking at each other. My brother just said to me, "Something feels bad here, let's go back upstairs." So we did. We settled down for the night, and maybe around 1:30 a.m. I felt the foot of the bed lowering as if someone had sat down on the bed. My brother was fast asleep, but I have horrible insomnia. The bed stayed pressed down for almost 45 seconds, and I got scared. I pulled the comforter over my head and politely asked whatever it was to please leave because it was scaring me. Much to my surprise, the foot of the bed lifted back up, and I felt the presence leave the room. My brother said he had horrible nightmares all night. I told him what I experienced, and we decided that we were leaving right that moment. We didn't even have breakfast there, although it was complimentary. We just wanted out. We've never been back there but have talked about it a lot. It's definitely a place that felt wrong in so many ways. Haunted Highway 145. I'm telling the story mainly because I'm hoping that I am not the only person who has ever experienced this. I was not the only person in the vehicle when this occurred. There were 2 other people, and they both experienced the same thing. In December 2022, I was making a trip to Fresno to go pick up a car that I had purchased. For whatever reason, I took the southern route, which typically isn't the route you want to take. Being from the Monterey Bay area, I should have taken the northern route, but I digress. We left at approximately 8 o'clock in the evening. I drove all the way through. I was not tired. I was genuinely excited to arrive because I would be picking up the car the next morning. On Highway 145, about 3/4 of the way through, we were driving along, and out of the corner of my eye something caught my attention, and I let off the gas because I thought that it was a dog, and then I realized what I was seeing was not fully formed. It was translucent but dark, as if it were a shadow of some sort. It looked like a monkey on all 4s, and it was running as fast as I was driving. It started up on the hill and cut down diagonally, then continued to run alongside my truck until it cut across the road. That's when I slammed on the brakes, but I didn't come to a complete stop. I rolled for about 30 seconds, looked at my passenger, and asked, "Did you see that?" She and her husband both said yes, and I asked, "Was it real?" And they both said, "No." At the same time. As scared as I was, I knew that I didn't have any choice but to continue on. We were already almost there. I figured it was just something that was out there that people would see, but nobody would believe me if I told the story. But it wasn't until about 30 miles later that all of a sudden, my GPS went completely black. I knew that I should have stayed on that road, but when my GPS came back, it immediately had me turn onto a field road, and I thought, why is it having me turn onto this road? But I figured, okay, maybe there's traffic, maybe it's an alternate way to keep from making the trip too long. It just altered the course a little, so I made a left-hand turn and went up this road that I jokingly called Bob's Road, and I continued to drive on for about a mile when all of a sudden it looked as if a van, like a utility van, was sitting in the middle of the road. So again I let off the gas, and I'm driving, and mind you, this van is sitting underneath the street light, and I asked my friend, "Can you tell if I can go around this van?" She was like, "No, I can't tell, it's too far up there," and as we got closer, something was telling me not to keep going, and my heart was beating out of my chest, mind you, with the other thing that had just happened with the running monkey, so I turned around and I went back. Got back to 145, made a left-hand turn, and continued on the highway. I don't know what road it was. I wish that I could find the trip in my Google Maps, but for some reason, my maps go back at least 5 years, but this particular trip, the entire trip, is completely missing from my maps. It's like I never even went there, and I know I did because I brought back the car. So I'm asking you guys if any of you have ever traveled this highway. Have you ever had any experiences that you could not explain or something similar to what I experienced? I'm across the country in Georgia, and in early spring 2022, I was driving my new car at night with my mom in the front seat and my grown daughter in the back along with her baby. If anyone listening to this is familiar with the area, I was on Highway 25 between Waynesboro and Millen, which is definitely in the middle of nowhere. My car has adaptive cruise control and adaptive high beams, so if anything had run in front of me, it would have reacted accordingly. Additionally, I was driving with extra caution because it was my new car and I had important passengers with me. The road is a divided 4-lane highway, and I was driving in the left lane when I saw something literally materialize about 1.5 car lengths ahead of me in the right lane. It was on all 4s and partially visible, but where its spine would have been, it was more solidly formed. It was a grayish color, and it definitely looked too big to be a dog but was somewhat shorter than a deer, and it hauled ass running off to the side of the road. I couldn't see where it went as we drove past that area because of the tall grass, but my brain was tripping trying to determine what I'd seen, and my daughter said, "What was that?" I was instantly relieved to know she saw it, too, and I asked her to describe what she saw, and her description was precisely what I had seen as well. Again, there's no way it was something that ran in front of the car, and I've never heard of a similar situation, but your description sounds a bit similar in the sense it was somewhat transparent and was running as fast as you were driving. In my case, this experience led me to believe that interdimensional beings could possibly be real. The day we pissed off something in the basement. My little brother and I enjoyed getting into mischief growing up. We particularly enjoyed exploring our haunted house. We noticed no matter how many people are in the basement, no one ever wants to stay very long. It always felt like multiple sets of eyes were watching you, waiting. Around that time our church gave us small Bibles, and we were reading them because we heard that can deter ghosts. We figured the most haunted place in our house was the basement, so we went to the basement to read a Bible out loud. We should have known something was up when we went to the basement door and it wouldn't budge open. It took both of us to force the door open. We got to the basement, and I started reading. I didn't get more than 2 pages in when we started. Your very heavy footsteps and whispers. We just thought it was one of our older siblings ducking with us. We looked where the footsteps were coming from, there was nothing there. But the moment we looked away, my little brother slammed to the ground. He screamed in agony, begging for help. I immediately stopped reading and ran to his side. "Tell them up." I honestly thought he tripped. That was until I saw the scratch marks on his back. There were 3 distinct marks, they looked like a velociraptor or something scratched him hard. I immediately yelled in all general directions to leave us alone. That was a freaking mistake. We heard a blood-curdling scream, and we took off running up the stairs we went. The moment we made it upstairs, the door slammed shut so hard it cracked the hinges. We learned that day too, never read your Bible in the basement. Whatever is down there really doesn't like it. To this day you can't stay down in that basement for too long. I am 25, and I will not stay down there longer than I have to. I don't know what I just experienced, but it wasn't good. Before I started my current job as a security officer, I was very much a non-believer of the paranormal, to the point where I would try to debunk anything and everything involving ghosts or whatever is out there. I work in a fairly large factory that has a lot of office buildings. It's been here since the 70s, I believe, so it is quite old. Since COVID most of the office workers have been relocated, and they're mostly abandoned. There's one building in particular that has a reputation for being haunted among some of the people that work here. It's completely detached from the rest of the plant, so there's no outside noise from the factory in it. Even when it was still in use, it had an eerie vibe to it. I would patrol this building hundreds of times at night and even in very early morning hours. As of today, I've had 3 strange encounters. The first 2 were before the pandemic. They weren't really that scary, just a little off. But what happened today I can't explain, and my heart is still racing as I type this out, as it happened 30 minutes ago. The first strange thing I encountered was a doorknob shaking. Yeah, I know the classic weird creepy ghost phenomenon. As I was walking down one of the hallways, I heard a rattling noise coming from the conference room. I turned the corner, and the doorknob was just shaking. This is a big heavy metal door, so I don't know what could have caused it. I put my hand on the knob and opened the door, and there was nothing in there. Since then I've never seen this happen again. The second one I was on patrol again. There's another small office connected to the previous building. As I entered through the security door, I heard a door slam in the office. All of the office doors in this particular office have windows with blinds on them. I wasn't necessarily freaked out because it was still early in the evening, so there could have been someone working still. As I went to investigate where the sound was coming from, I turned to look at one of the doors, and the blinds were rocking left and right. I had to check it out to make sure either A, it wasn't just another guard messing with me, or B, it wasn't an intruder. I opened the door, and there was no one. No one in the entire office. I can't explain it. That leads me to what just happened about 30 minutes ago. Since COVID I usually drive from the guard post to one of the bathrooms in the plant so I can go to the bathroom because we have none at my post. I decided to just go to the office building where I heard the doorknob shake because it's private and I wasn't necessarily creeped out by it, and it's broad daylight. As soon as I entered, an overwhelming feeling of dread just encapsulated me. Even though it's daytime, most of the outside light doesn't get in. There are windows, but they're small. The whole time I was in there I just felt like I was being watched or followed. I can't explain it. When I was using the bathroom, on the second floor, I just felt this wave of anxiety take over me, and I was scared to leave the bathroom and walk back to my car. I finished up and speed walked to the nearest exit and sped down the stairs. The whole time I felt like someone was right behind me. I got out of there as quickly as I possibly could and walked around the entire building on the outside back to my car. I have never felt this kind of dread or terror before in my life, and I honestly can't explain it. I didn't see or hear anything, but what I felt was more terrifying than anything I had ever seen. I was 100% a skeptic before I started working here, and now I don't know what to believe. If anyone has an explanation of this feeling I experienced, please leave a comment. Although my experience starts off like every haunting movie, I promise this is precisely how it went down. My best friend flips houses and found this huge Victorian mansion that went into foreclosure and was up for auction. He was the only bidder and paid next to nothing for this house. I was there almost every day to help him demo and update as much as he could. It got me out of my house, kept my mind off things, and taught me a thing or two about renovating a house. It was a win-win for both of us. Besides the whole place having a cold, abandoned feeling, the only place that made my stomach turn was a specific room in the basement. I felt like I could pinpoint the exact corner where the bad vibes were coming from and voiced this to my friend and his girlfriend many times. I could barely step foot in this room. It felt like an invisible barrier was in front of me. Once I went into the room, I felt sick, bothered, and sad. This has never happened to me before. One night, we were out on the front porch when a neighbor came over and started talking to us about the history of the house. He said it was one of the first ones built in the town. It was once part of the Underground Railroad, how ducking cool, at one time a firehouse, and later a funeral home. We thought it was pretty cool and went to Google to find out more. Unfortunately, all of the history stuff like that was only at the library, so our search stopped there. One day, I arrived at the house before my friend did. He told me to go inside and start getting things ready. Side note, at this point, the only working bathroom was in the basement, and I was the only one in the house. I started getting things ready on the main floor but kept catching glimpses of things out of the corner of my eye. It happened enough times to thoroughly freak me out. Some time passed, and my friend still wasn't there when my urge to pee became too great to ignore. I only had one inside option, in the basement next to the creepy room. I was about 25 at the time and was so afraid to go in the basement that I peed outside, in broad daylight, where numerous neighbors could have seen. I'm also a girl, so it was pretty clear what I was doing. This is how scared I was. After my friend's girlfriend had some creepy vibes, she decided to find a medium to come stay the night and do a full-blown Ghost Adventures lockdown. I'm super into the creepy stuff, so I was excited to be a part of it and hear if they found anything. They did not want to know anything about the house or any experiences we had before they did their investigation. The next day after the lockdown, we sat down with the medium and her team to discuss their findings. I shit you not, the medium says they found a spirit of a slave that had not crossed over. He was in the basement of the house when it was part of the Underground Railroad. The medium noted he was afraid of people and saw him cowering in this one corner. It was the same room and exact corner that made me feel uneasy and sick to my stomach. I visibly turned white as a ghost, and every hair on my body was sticking up. The medium noticed my reaction, and I told her about my weird vibes and the stories the neighbor told us. She said she could tell I was sensitive and in tune to other energies around us that other people can't see/feel. I have a real demon story. This was something my mother told me a few years ago. When I was around 3 or 4 years old, my mother and father enjoyed exploring abandoned houses, and I have some memories of these adventures as well. Well, this one instance they took me along and asked me if I wanted to go in as well, and I did, until I got out of the car and looked at the house. I immediately started throwing a fit and wanted to not go inside. My mother thought I was just being bratty. This was also in the daytime. Well, I'm still brought along, and the house is explored. Nothing weird besides some German books in the attic. Well, the coming nights start to get weird for my mom. As cliché as it is, my mom started to wake up at 3 a.m. exactly with the feeling of pure dread. A little while after, so did my dad. Then my mom started to get bruises out of nowhere. This eventually escalated to my mom being punched in the throat by nothing. When no one was in the bedroom, my dad got slapped. Now our only bathroom is upstairs. At our party my parents hosted, people were waiting in line, and people suddenly felt sick, only upstairs. My mom's best friend saw the fan turn on in my room, as well as the switch by itself. I never learned if they ever smelled anything rotten, but people waking up at specific times in the night, feeling complete dread, feeling sick in specific places, and smelling a terrible smell that moves around are all signs of an evil spirit or possibly a demon. They ended up getting rid of it by coming into contact with someone that knew what they were doing. I have no memory of these specific events, but they did show me pictures of the abandoned house. They aren't the type to lie, and over the years I've experienced many things, Apparently our family is akin to sensing these types of things. The lightning/silver ghost of Midway, Utah. Today I was told I should share my family's and my town's story of our local ghost, Claire. So I used to live in the town of Midway, Utah. Which, up until about 7 years ago, was a farming town before it became a popular cabin town, as it was located only about 5 miles away from Park City, Utah. Founded in 1891, but there were people living there since 1850. It became a busy hub with mining alongside Park City. And there was one major mine up Snake Creek Canyon that not many today know existed, as you are only able to find evidence of its existence in the town archives at the town hall. This may be because it was never given a name. But the 2 documents I could find about the mine are a mention of its owner's name in a water-damaged parchment, a legible L-FAR, and a short newspaper clipping from the Salt Lake Tribune about a mining disaster that ended 17, but I estimate that number to be in the 20s or 30s. But the way they mined this area was not by digging a tunnel but by stripping away layer after layer of dirt and rock on top, a very unusual way to mine back then, may I add. With the small settlement sitting at the bottom of this scrape-away mine looking for or on the surface. And, as we all know, getting rid of the vegetation and leaving dirt above this exposed pit is the perfect scenario for a mudslide. Especially with the heavy snow melts we get each spring loosening the soil. And as you have all guessed by now, a mudslide did happen, killing whoever was at the bottom camp/shanty town, a very horrible way to die, suffocating and being crushed under dirt and rubble. Which is where a majority of the townsfolk agree Claire has originated from. That she was a young girl, probably in her mid to late teens by appearance, who was caught up in this tragic accident. And has ever since been trapped in Snake Creek Canyon, not able to return to the spirit world. But every so often, especially when a lightning storm is around, people tend to catch slight glimpses of her. Now she's not one of the shadow figures or just blobs of light you tend to hear about. She is a full-body apparition who glows like someone is shining a flashlight on her. Now no words can truly describe what I saw, but try your best to imagine this. Imagine a teen girl, probably around 5 feet 2 inches -6, dressed in pioneer clothes. So a long dress to the knees with a white apron in front, Google pioneer clothes, and that will give you a good idea. She has blonde brown hair about to her shoulder. Many describe her as having a near perfect face. But that's not why she stands out. It's because of this aura around her. Almost like that small bit of blue around a lightning strike where the air has been heated up so it has that waviness to it. But it also has that same feeling of the power and intensity of lighting. But the most stunning thing, along with many other paranormal events, is the eyes, a brilliant brightness to them with shades of blue ever changing inside them, with the sclera and pupil, the white and black parts of the eyeball, still as visible as a living human. And people sometimes catch glimpses of her eyes while driving on stormy nights not too far off in the trees. Not because they're looking for her, but because they stand out so much more vividly than animals. But one of the most terrifying and exciting moments of my life was when I was at my family cabin. And happened to be standing, if not closer, 30 feet away from her. Looking down at her from the balcony in our cabin. This particular event happened in the late evening of May 24, 2019. Right at the time of year when the snow was melting and not many people were up there because most people don't use their cabins in the winter, as the road is not plowed or maintained until spring. However, I noticed a movement in the trees while I was inside looking out the window. Initially assuming it to be a deer or moose, I decided to step outside for a closer look. And as I walked outside, whatever was there before had vanished. So I began to walk back inside until I got this beyond powerful feeling that something was looking at me from the tree line. So I turned around, and I kid you not, she just appeared slowly there before me. First, I saw her eyes, and then the rest of her body followed. But for what felt like hours, but could not have been more than 10 seconds, she just stared right at me. With those powerful and lifelike, yet lifeless, eyes. Locking me in place in what I can describe as only a trance. Washed over with extreme feelings of loneliness and helplessness. Making me, as the only reasonable explanation I can give, feel what she was feeling. And just as fast as she had appeared, she started slowly fading away. The body faded first, leaving those piercing eyes looking at me last. And I probably stood there for another 30 seconds just contemplating what I saw. Wondering like mad if it was a trick of the light or of the mind. But the second I realized I could not explain what I just saw, I ran inside and went to the highest floor and locked myself in the bathroom with the lights on until the sun came up. And I went and told all my family the next day, and they all thought I was crazy, except my grandpa, who claims he has also seen her eyes. To this day I am still afraid but oddly enthusiastic about going to the cabin and maybe seeing her again. The old Warden house. Back in 2006, Our whole family used to live in a rural town called Lengong. At that time, Lengong is still underdeveloped, and most of the town is just forest and small roads. My father worked as a school security guard, and my mother owns a small sendal shop. Sendal is a sweet and cold dessert. In July of that year, our house got burned down. After that incident, we really had no money to rent/buy a house, and out of mercy from the headmaster of the school that my father worked at, they allow us to stay at the old Warden house near the abandoned school hostel. We were grateful for it. For the first few months living there, it was okay. But in the third month we started to experience this weird haunting. One night, when my father was out working the night shift, around 11 p.m. suddenly we heard someone knocking on our door, and my mother just opened the door because she thought my father had come back home, but there was no one outside. At that time, there was only me, my older brother, and my mother in the house. And my mother immediately closed the door. I was scared, but my mother and brother calmed me down. It is weird because nobody lived near our house, and our house was mostly surrounded by forest, and just beside it, there was the abandoned school hostel, but it was locked and abandoned a long time ago. And as we were all ready to go to sleep, the door was being knocked again, but this time, it was loud and aggressive as if someone was trying to break into our house. All of us started to panic, and my mother yelled, "Sapatu? Talongla jangan gangu kami. Who is that? Please don't disturb us." And the knocking suddenly stops, but we hear footsteps circling our house. The footsteps sounded like someone walking slowly but dragging their feet. We were so scared, and my mother started to recite some Quranic verses, "We're Muslim, BTW," and a few minutes later the footstep sounds were finally gone. That was the first time I ever experienced something like that, and it was terrifying. I could never forget it. And a few weeks later, same situation. My father is not home and is working the night shift. Around 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning we were woken by the sound of something running on top of the roof. FYI, the Warden's house is an old traditional Malay house. Most parts of the house are made out of wood and use a zinc rooftop. It was so loud, and it sounded like something with two legs running and hopping on top of the roof. This goes on for a few minutes, and then we hear the same slow footsteps circling our house, but this time it started to scratch on the wall as if it were trying to scare us. All of this haunting went on for almost 2 years, and then my parents decided to move out of the house and found a new house to rent near the town. We all started to pack our stuff and clean the house and the surroundings. My father borrows a lorry from his friend, and we load all the stuff on the lorry. After we finish loading the stuff, my father goes to check the house to make sure everything is okay before locking the door. And then my father entered the lorry with my older brother while my mother drove our mini scooter with me. As we are leaving the house, I turn my head around just to look at the house for one last time. What I saw next is something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. I saw a figure like a human exactly on the top of the abandoned hostel roof, sitting in a squat position. It had long legs, and its hands were touching the roof. It has long hair that covers the whole face, and the skin is pale and bluish. I was horrified by what I just saw. I immediately turn my head back, close my eyes, and hug my mother tightly from behind as we ride the scooter. A few days later, I told my family about what I saw the day we moved out, but no one believed me. They say maybe I was seeing something else. I wrote this just to tell you guys that what I saw that day is real. I swear it is true. I am 7 years old when that happens, but I know what I saw with my own eyes. I can still remember it. Thank you to those who read it until the end. I feel frustrated because my family didn't believe me, and I kept it to myself all this time. The darkness in the countryside. I grew up in a rural town in eastern South Dakota. The town had many stories about the paranormal but often tried to hush anyone that spoke of them. As with the large religious community, many individuals refused to believe that there may be something paranormal inside their town. Because of this, no records are online of this specific location. I'm currently 23 years old, but when I was in my latter years of high school, I enjoyed sneaking into abandoned places with my 2 cousins and younger brother. My aunt, dad, and one of my high school friends would at times join us, as, quite frankly, the police didn't really care unless you deliberately went out of your way to harm property. The first incident took place in what I believe was August. My family and I were told about a location out in the country where a woman and her brother had passed away in the house, and it had burnt down. The couple was known to be very sweet but extraordinary penny pinchers. When the house burnt down, teenagers in the 90s snuck out and practiced dark magic and tried summoning demons. They were later caught as the police found animals sacrificed on the land inside of pentagrams and had requested that the new owner, a farmer, keep the land fenced and watched often. This stopped people for a while, but the stories came back, and individuals started sneaking out again. Stories were reported of women's old shoes being found on the road, screams heard from the land, and the on-site windmill blowing in the opposite direction of the wind and stopping once your vehicle was stopped. My 2 cousins, one of their friends, my brother, one of my friends, and I went out about 12 p.m. My friend and I stayed watching the vehicle in case the farmer would come barreling out, but thankfully we were safe. About half an hour in, we heard scratches on the top of the car but figured it was our imagination. Another half an hour passes, and we watch the others come sprinting back to the car, and my older cousin was crying. The car refused to start, but the farmer came barreling out, and we thankfully got the car started and scrammed. My cousin later stopped the vehicle and reported that when they had all split off, his friend and he were near a shed with a hay bale outside. When they turned around to look at the hay bale, a figure started crawling over the hay bale moaning. They stopped in their tracks, and a blood-curdling scream sounded from the barn where rituals had been performed. From there, they all took off to the vehicle. For the second incident, I was not with them, but my aunt, 2 cousins, and brother went out about 11 p.m. The night began with my older cousin banging on the barn door asking if anyone was there. Nothing. A second knock and a black shadow sped across the barn, and they heard moaning. They decided to walk down to the ravine area to look at a few abandoned cars, and my cousin reported feeling like he was being watched. Upon looking up, he felt compelled to pull out his phone and capture the moment. As he recorded, a tall black shadow with glowing yellow eyes walked across the ravine, stopped and looked at him, and walked away. My cousin dropped to his knees and cried. He felt every part of his body was being drained and that he was entering a depression he had never felt before. My aunt and brother grabbed him and tore him away, but I heard moans as they ran. In the third incident, my friend, older cousin, my brother, and I went out to the location to explore. You all are probably thinking how we are this stupid, but curiosity got the best of us. Once there, we decided to look at the structure of where the house stood and the nearby shed. While everyone was inspecting the foundation, I turned and watched a white apparition fade into the trees. We stayed behind and didn't witness anything else. We have decided not to venture out here further to ensure we don't mess with whatever evil is out there. My father and I have driven by a few times, and the windmill would speed up faster in the opposite direction as we drove by, then would completely stop with us. We later tried finding the police files on the property or just anything in general, and nothing could be found. I've thought about recording the windmill, but I'm afraid whatever it is on the property might come back with me. My terrifying experience at the infamous Myrtles plantation. Now, I know that with places that are kind of touristy as far as paranormal things go, they can be kind of questionable as far as the validity of what happens there. And this being such, I always tend to err on the side of caution as far as what I believe, and I always do a fairly thorough check of wherever I'm staying for any artificial motors and wireless speakers, basically anything that can cause things to happen that may seem paranormal. The cabin we stayed in came up clear. Anyways, on with the story. Around 2 p.m., we arrived at the plantation and received a complimentary tour of the grounds. I got vibes all over the place. It was pretty insane already, because I get vibes, but rarely do I get vibes that strong. We were then shown the place we would be staying the night and were let in and essentially set free. I did my evaluation on the room, and then afterward I noticed something. Near the back door of the room, I felt an intense energy that was even stronger than what I had experienced throughout the rest of the grounds. I knew something had happened there. I knew I had to find out what had happened. This topic comes back up again later. By this point, it was probably about 5 p.m., and understandably, we were pretty hungry. We left the plantation to go into town and get some food. We got back around 6:30 p.m. and began to walk over to our cabin when a friendly woman we had seen earlier came over, knowing we were paranormal enthusiasts, and asked if we wanted to see her room, which was in the actual plantation house. We were staying in a slave cabin. We said, of course, and so she brought us up to her room. We looked around, and it was pretty regular as far as vibes go, but when I went into the bathroom, I felt the most oppressive, awful atmosphere. It was creepy and terrible, and I hated it and instantly wanted to leave. I didn't necessarily think something had happened there, but I knew that something inhabited that bathroom, and I knew it wasn't something kind. We didn't stay in that place for long, but it was cool to look at. We left after maybe 10 to 20 minutes of looking around. We went back to our cabin and got settled in for the night. Lots of vibes there, and my sister and I, we were somewhat younger at the time, slept in the same bed because we were scared. She and I stayed up pretty late playing a game called Farkle. It's pretty fun and really good for a time killer. As soon as midnight rolled around, we decided it would probably be best to put away the game and go to bed. But as soon as we had put the game away and the noise of the game and our voices was gone, I noticed a noise. The rocking chair on the front porch of the cabin was rocking methodically back and forth. The rocking I heard was so strong that I was certain it wasn't the wind causing it. I got a little bit freaked out but decided I wasn't going to mention it to my younger sister, as it would probably just trouble her. So she and I lay down to sleep. She fell asleep pretty quickly, but I was having issues falling asleep, with all the thoughts and worries running through my head. But all those seemed rather irrelevant as I heard footsteps on the stones outside our cabin. Now, mind you, our cabin was fenced in, and so it couldn't be entered by anyone who didn't have the key. But, regardless, I heard the footsteps, and they continued as I heard light slaps of feet on the wooden porch along with a groan of the weight, and they continued on forward, and the noise continued right on through the door as I heard the figure pass right by my bed but saw nothing and then continue out the back door. I also smelled some rosy scent, which seems to accompany spirits relatively often for some reason. I really had a hard time falling asleep after that. This event happened around 1 in the morning, and I didn't fall asleep until around 3:30. When we woke up, we went into the main house for breakfast, and we heard stories from the other campers about their experiences, which were equally terrifying, including people who felt a presence sit down on their bed in the middle of the night and a person coming out of a cabin to tell people to be quiet, but the cabin was actually void of people. We ate and shared our stories and then returned to our cabin. We sat there for a while, playing games on our tablets and just relaxing, as it was a nice cabin despite being haunted. I can't recall the reason, but an argument broke out between my sister and my mom. The argument obviously didn't sit well with whatever spirits occupied the cabin, because it was cut short by the faucet in the bathroom turning on full force and then turning back off. The three of us panicked and fled the cabin in less than 30 seconds. That was how that ended, and I'm never going to forget how scary it was to be awake by myself in a cabin in the middle of nowhere and suddenly realize you're not alone. There was an old mill on the outskirts of my town. We would visit the old mill on the outskirts of town to create mud donuts or fish in the river that supplies one of the main lakes, located just a few miles from the stream. It was also a place where we, as teenagers, would smoke and explore, with the majority of our visits occurring at night. The mill has an entry level, a level above that, another above that, and then the roof access from there. Below the entry level is a level below that, and below that level was the basement. This was back in 2003-2008-ish, when phones didn't have flashlights built into them. We never brought one because all we cared about was getting stoned. So we were using lighters and the light from the screens of our phones to see. We never really could see anything, even with the lighters and phone screens. We ended up making our way to the other end of the basement, where we happened to find another sublevel beneath the basement that we only found due to there being a 4-foot diameter hole in the floor and missing boards/planks after the hole. It appeared that there was another 10-foot drop to the earthen floor below. So we decided the next time we came, we would all bring flashlights and some rope. So we could finally see what the basement looked like. Even in the middle of the day, visibility was so poor that you couldn't see anything down there. That's where we finally realized the horror down there in the basement. Demonic symbols were spray painted on the walls, not just random 666s and pentagrams. These were seals. These seals and symbols represented each of the 7 princes of hell. Giant pentagrams are drawn on the floor with more seals/symbols in the pentagrams. At this time, we didn't know what the symbols meant, just what a pentagram was. Since we had flashlights and a camera, we took pictures of everything we saw in the basement. Then came the time to drop someone into the subfloor and see what was under there. As we approached the hole in the floor where my friend was about to drop into, a big blast of cold air hit us. Granted, it was early fall and probably 60 degrees outside on this night. This was different, though. It wasn't just cold, it made all the hairs on my neck stand on end. And that's when we heard it. Something was in the air, at least it felt like that, but it was sound. It's like it floated over to us, another blast of cold air, and this voice says my friend's name clearly, clear as day. The friend who was about to drop down into the subfloor. That's when we realized that there was something else besides just us in that mill. Something that had been conjured in this abandoned 120-year-old factory, and it was doing its best job in scaring the absolute shit out of us. And so, we did what all scared people do. We ran back over to the steps, let go of the rope because who cares at that point, and made it back to the main level and burst through the doors on the way out. We all stood there staring at the mill, panting and out of breath. Later that week, I decided to pull the photos from the small digital camera I had taken with me. I realized that the seals and symbols on the wall, as well as those in the pentagrams on the floor, were associated with specific demons. This was especially true for the 7 princes of hell. It's crazy to think that in a town of 10,000 people, there are still enough crazy-ass people to go and perform these rituals. There were always dead birds, rats, mice, rabbits, raccoons, etc., which we encountered over the months and years before this particular night. What's so ironic about this story is a contracting management group bought the property in 2018, and they completely refurbished it and turned it into townhouses and apartments. If they only knew what was buried beneath their brand new apartment, they would probably think twice about buying one there. I went on a road trip with my girlfriend to her mother's yesterday. It's my birthday today, and they wanted to have a party for her and me. Her mom delayed us, so we took the most back route possible and went into full-on no man's land in Alabama. I've had to survive in the woods for a couple of years while homeless, so I wasn't that uncomfortable with that factor, but it is a cool road, has existed for almost 200 years, and they still haven't paved it, and it goes for miles and takes you into Georgia through the back way, and we came across this cemetery called Deer Heads Cove. I wanted to check it out because I love finding old hidden cemeteries because they have the most history. However, it became apparent that I had underestimated the situation. So we parked, and first off nothing felt off. I'm not a very paranormal person, so I don't really do the whole the energy here is blah blah, but y'all, the further back I went, the worse the energy felt. Like I could actually feel something was not right the further back I went. Sure enough, we started finding graves that had been dug up, kids' graves. And on top of that, there were flies everywhere over a particular set of graves that belonged to a specific family who apparently could not make a kid that lasted more than a year in the 1930s. The energy felt the worst at the oldest grave in the cemetery. It was from the 1700s. Something just felt really bad about it. But we wanted to figure out what was going on with the graves. So we sat and waited and brought her mom back with us. She has this really weird knack for just feeling when things are really off in a certain sense. Before we even told her where things felt bad/off, she pointed to the exact same area I felt that same bad feeling at. She said it was pure evil. Waited till nightfall, and while I was turning the car around, some headlights came on from the back. We had been sitting there and would have seen someone come in because there's only one entrance. And we were the only people there the whole time. What freaks me out the most is that's where the oldest grave in the cemetery was, and the vehicle did not bounce at all from the rough terrain and made no sound from an engine or gravel under the tires. Looking back, the area he followed me through was filled with headstones, so they couldn't have gone through but somehow did. After that harrowing ordeal, asked some folks over in Trenton about the history of that place along with looking up historical records. Turned into an insane rabbit hole of supposed witchcraft, Satan worship, and all sorts of nutty stuff. And funny enough, the family accused of all this is the owner of the oldest grave in the cemetery, where the headlights were. And this place doesn't show up on any haunted lists. After our experience, we looked it up, and it seems like only 2 other people kind of stumbled onto this place online and had similarly uncomfortable experiences there. I'm not a local, so I'm not trying to smear any families or anything they're talking about the witchcraft and whatnot. Just didn't expect a random cemetery I found while going to Trenton to turn into a whole uncomfortable experience. Go there for yourself during the day and see what I mean. There's an energy there unlike anything else, and it's dark. But just a suggestion to all, be careful if you go out here. This area is kind of a no man's land, so if something bad does happen, you'd be on your own. So it's better to be armed, and I'm not kidding about that. It's in an area where the police only show up to help you bury the body. There's a lot more to this story I'm leaving out because I'm exhausted. But I'd be happy to tell the full story when I get some rest. Because admittedly I just experienced everything I typed less than 12 hours ago. Update, the officer I reported the exhumed graves to went and checked it out about an hour ago. He refused to get out of his cruiser. He saw the same headlights and tried to pursue them, and they disappeared. Keep in mind the headlights moved toward him too. I have no idea what strange hell we stumbled on out there. Another update, so I've spoken with the groundskeepers and the family whose graves have been getting dug up. They said they had been exhuming some graves for proper burial and identification, but the ones we saw that were dug up were not those graves. On top of that, this area is known for its history with Appalachian folk magic, otherwise known as hillbilly voodoo. It's considered a dying practice and is non-religious but is still practiced in various forms in remote parts of Appalachia. So my guess is that the stories of witchcraft and Satanists are actually misunderstood folk magic. But regardless, whatever I felt there was awful. I've done many paranormal investigations lately. At the start of the year, I was on the verge of quitting because standing around in the dark for 6 hours often resulted in getting nothing. Occasionally, you will get something weird, but we'd had a dry spell where it was basically nothing whatsoever. Not even spooky vibes. I've been to castles, prisons, pubs, theaters, etc., all the stereotypical supposedly haunted places, often hundreds of years old, and they just seemed flat. Occasionally unsettling, but I had never experienced that feeling of oh dear, this is dreadful. But there was one place that is now a community center. It's pretty standard looking and still in use. You can probably find thousands of buildings like it around the UK. I went in there as a skeptic anyway and already with the expectation it would be shit. But it was horrible. It wasn't like you were being watched, it was more like the building was full and stuff was just going on around you, even though it wasn't. The energy was just insane. Hearing random noises all around you and upstairs, in other rooms, what sounded like footsteps and talking. On top of that, just this strong feeling of anxiety. It was quite oppressive, the temperature was up and down all over. One room dropped 8 degrees in about 10 minutes. You'd expect an empty room to go up when you pile 12 people into it. Had a heavy table seemingly move on its own in that room. Like I say, I'm pretty skeptical. Nothing happened there that can't be explained, and my idea of paranormal isn't really of dead people anyway. This was easily the worst feeling place I have ever visited, yet strangely my girlfriend didn't seem to find it as unpleasant. Maybe I was off that day. But Jesus, for me, it was just awful. Ghost of the Mount Washington Hotel, White Mountains, Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. I absolutely love this old hotel, and any chance I can get, I head to it, but the interesting thing about this hotel is it's haunted. The most active room of the hotel is room 314, it's referred to as the Princess Room, as this is the room that the hotel's founder's wife, Carolyn, would stay in. Her original canopy bed is in this room. That being said, you don't need to stay in that room to experience activity. My wife and I stayed in the hotel for our 15th anniversary last year, and the story we got to take away is the one I'm about to share. We stayed in one of the hotel's corner Vista rooms, which had phenomenal views, but they are located at the end of the long hallways. My wife and I go to dinner in the main dining hall, and they set up a table for Carolyn with the original china and silverware every night. I took a photo of the table and went and had dinner. As we finish and leave, my wife notices the knife and fork are on the plate. We mentioned it to the hostess, who immediately told the manager next to her that she did see the silverware move. My dumbass forgot to get a picture of the silverware position post-dinner. After going to the Speakeasy Club for a few drinks, we start to return to our room, but in the hallway halfway down the floor is a huge white mist. Its form becomes somewhat more human-like as I fumble for and drop my phone. It tilts what would be its head to us and then vanishes into the room. The room is 314. We go to the main desk to speak with one of the people, and they call the manager. The manager listens, writes a few things down, and says we are the third party that evening to report seeing Carolyn in the hall. The hotel has a small book of all the images of Carolyn that have been captured over the years, and you can request to view it during your visit. There have never been malevolent reports of encounters with her, but she has been seen many times, and the waitlist to get this room is very long. Highly recommend the experience. I, along with others who visited and were familiar with the legend of Hell's Funnel, have a story to share. Now we come to what has been said to me to be on par with most haunted places in Strasbourg, the Gondor Mansion. The funny thing about this story is it was my first adventure in high school. I, along with my brother and our friends Ethan and Humam, checked it out. This experience was before it was renovated and turned into a house, which now has local residents that live inside and has turned into a very beautiful property. At the time we went ghost hunting and even went into the abandoned house at the time. The house had a horse stable, a pond, and even once had a clubhouse that a local Boy Scout troop made, as I was told. We didn't find any ghosts, until we left and shined a light into the basement and saw a figure with a red material that freaked us out, which we thought may have been a curtain, but when we thought about it, there weren't any curtains we noticed when we were there. So that freaked us out. Another tale is from a friend who actually lives by there. Once, he went there to camp with his uncle. They both set up a fire and waited till sundown. He told me that when sleeping he heard something outside, and they checked it out and found nothing. They dismissed it as just a squirrel or any animal that would be running around at night. Upon getting in the tent, though, he let out a scream because he felt someone grab his shoulder behind him while his uncle was in front of him. They both left and never went there at night again. You might be wondering why this place is called Hell's Funnel and how it got its name. The incident occurred on a single day in the early 20th century when the property was still a sawmill. During this time, a man slipped, and the saw blades dismembered either his hand or his entire arm. The property is on the outskirts of Strasbourg, so getting to a hospital wasn't much of an option. So the man instead rushed home and sat on the front porch to see her one last time. His wife instead only saw her husband suffer and eventually bleed out and die. His wife, feeling increasingly depressed, ultimately decided to take her own life in order to be reunited with her husband. Both of them reportedly haunt the property. People claim to see spirits floating above the water in the pond by the house. There are also stories of a female spirit walking around the area of the pond or above the water's surface. Some people claim to have been scratched by something while approaching the pond or grabbed. My friends, who I previously mentioned, were camping near the pond at the time of the alleged grab, which lends credibility to the claims. Yet that is only one of the stories I've heard. There is another with a way darker turn. This one starts just like the first story of the man cutting off his hand or arm with a saw blade while cutting a log. It was his good hand that he used to work with too. So not being able to work his job due to his disability, the sawmill fired him. Eventually, not being able to work angered the man, so with his other hand, he picked up an axe and headed back to the sawmill. Seeking revenge, he hacked up all of the workers at the time. Then took his own life. Story has it that all those souls became trapped there, forming a funnel right to hell. That's why you see spirits there, because they are damned souls that escaped hell and ones on their way into hell. Or perhaps the souls the man killed are lingering in the place, trapped where they were killed. If you look at the trees there as well above the road, they curve inward. I live in a patch of woods that is surrounded by neighbors with land. I live on a dirt road, and my house is the only one-story house on the right on 5 acres mostly clear. A neighbor owns 10 acres next to us, and the other neighbors are on the left. Up this dirt road, the last house is one of our good friends, and beside them is another cleared property we don't know who owns. The property is about 1.5 acres and is cleared, which we use for four-wheeling. I'm assuming they had a bonfire, and I tend to go up there to get the stuff they left behind. Note that this property is the last bit of owned property on this dirt road, and it's further back in the woods and dense enough to be a pocket. So my cousin had come over, and we were having a good time and were going to take a walk so we could go check out the bonfire and talk about our lives. My youngest brother tagged along, wanting to get something from the bonfire, so we took him and headed up the hill past our neighbor's house. As we got there, the sun was just setting. Well, I went up to the char pile to make sure no broken glass would cut my brother. While I did that, my cousin was talking to him, and they were laughing, but I had a feeling that I was being watched. It was common and it saved me more than I could ever really be grateful for. This sixth sense is the feeling you get when you know that something or someone is watching you. Yeah, I felt that it was an uneasy chill, something I don't get with family or friends or people in general so promptly, so I shut them up, and just as I did, we all heard a twig snap fairly close to where I was standing, which was right by the thick brush, at most 10 feet in front of me. I reached down, grabbing a glass wine bottle, ready to use it if it were a person or an animal. I don't know why, but I thought it'd work. Then I heard another twig snap roughly 20 meters away from me and another about 15 meters shortly after. Believing it was a pack of coyotes, I signaled my cousin and younger brother to back up toward the road while I prepared to make a loud noise in hopes of alerting our neighbor. However, just as I was about to act, I heard an extremely loud movement through the brush that was louder than any spooked buck, deer, cougar, or coyote could make. The sound startled me, and I told my cousin and brother to run. I followed, and by the time we got to the dirt road, it had stopped. Not another sound came, no rustling, no sounds of struggle, no nothing. I stopped and told my younger brother to go home. He listened, and I could only assume that he did so out of fear, which was understandable. My cousin, thank the stars, stayed with me, and we eventually went back to being the stupid teenagers we were. We went to check it out as we let the adrenaline settle. I insisted on waiting a moment. My cousin agreed, and we waited patiently. After a good 2 to 3 minutes and nothing happening, I began walking to the brush and peering inside of it. We live in the state of Washington bordering Canada. Bears weren't uncommon, but we don't live near the border or where bears live mainly. The closest we have to a bear is my fat dog, but he's sweeter and more chunk than bear. When I peered into the brush, there was more clearing under the initial brush. However, it was quite tall, and unless you were actually jumping or stuck, there wasn't any reason as to why for the loud sound. In fact, the sound was deafening now that I sit here and reflect in writing. The sound was loud even from where my cousin and brother stood, and they were the farthest from it, and I don't mean music in headphones blasting loud. It was probably if you were in a party and the speaker suddenly went from 10 to 100 without warning, staying for 30 seconds, then going instantly to 0. I should also mention I've gotten lost in these woods countless times, but with the help of another paranormal friend, which I might write about depending on my motivation along with how well this does, I've gotten out safe and sound. But never have I heard such a loud sound in my life. I could be exaggerating since I am diagnosed with ADHD, meaning naturally sounds can often be louder than they are to normal ears. However, my cousin, who isn't diagnosed with ADHD or autism or any other disorder that could possibly make sounds loud without reason, told me that it was really loud. My younger brother confirmed, but I don't want to assume that was pure honesty. Now when I think back to it, it was quite silent, no birds or bugs, no frogs, no dogs, just pure silence before the sound. After the sound, everything returned. I would have known if I had shut them up faster, but talking and crunching tuned down my senses. I don't know what it could have been. I think it was paranormal activity because, after that moment, everything returned to normal with the sounds of nature replacing the eerie silence. My cousin agreed. I have countless other paranormal experiences too, so I am certain it was paranormal, which doesn't surprise me, but I want to know if there is a logical explanation to it all. I stayed in a haunted hotel, unaware of its history until I arrived. As soon as I drove onto the property, I immediately felt that something was off. Although I have felt the presence of spirits on a few rare occasions before and after this experience, it has only happened a handful of times. This instance is the only time that I've experienced spirits who felt evil and gave me a constant feeling of dread. I was there for a work event over Halloween weekend, a solid 5-hour drive away from my home. I felt so creeped out that when I washed my face at night, I was too scared to close my eyes and basically washed my face with my eyes open. I just felt this overwhelming fear that when I looked up into the mirror, there would be someone behind me. The first night I had an extremely violent nightmare that ended with me being choked, and I woke up around 3 a.m. coughing as if I had actually been choked. I was terrified. I turned on the lights and stayed awake until the sun came up. The next morning I went to breakfast and started attending all the various work meetings and events that I was there for, and at some point in the afternoon I decided to go back to my room for a quick nap. I almost never take naps, but I was so exhausted from staying up all night that I knew I needed to attend other work events later that day and into the night. At this point it's around 2 p.m., and I lie down for a nap. Once again, I wake up coughing from another violent nightmare where someone is choking me. Okay, now I'm starting to get really concerned. I go downstairs and speak with some friends of mine about the fact that I feel very uncomfortable at this hotel and I keep having these violent nightmares, and I think that the hotel is haunted. My friends are confused because this is not something I've ever said before, and they did not feel what I was feeling. I was confused because the feeling was so strong, even when I wasn't dreaming. It was a constant feeling of suffocating dread. That night I really did not want to go to sleep, but I had to because I had more work events the next day and I was exhausted. Around 3 a.m., I awakened from a violent nightmare in which I was once again the victim of a chokehold. That's when I decided to run away. I turned on all the lights and threw all my things in my bag in 5 minutes. I then went downstairs, woke up the person at the front desk, and asked to check out immediately. I then drove 5 hours straight home in the middle of the night. At around 9 in the morning, I got a text from one of my friends asking when I was going to come downstairs for breakfast, and that's when I told them that I was already home. I will never set foot on that property ever again. I can take a hint. I used to live in a haunted place. My name's Zach, and I don't believe in ghosts. But my experience in this place remains in my head, and I just can't explain what I've seen, felt, and heard. When my mother was with her ex-boyfriend, he bought a house, and we moved in. It was a yellow house, built in 1970 in Saint-Martin, in the countryside but not that far from Paris. The last owners were probably an old couple, I never knew, probably because I never asked. It was in 2011. I'd spent 3 years living there before my stepfather and mom broke up and I left for my student life. Among the strange events that occurred, I remember the reversed cross on the ceiling in the garage. Every time we fixed the ceiling due to humidity, the shape always came back to the same place. My cat used to freak out right under the cross and yell like he was in pain. I assumed it was pure coincidence. One night, my family wasn't there, and a friend of mine slept over. I had to pick something in my mother's bedroom and felt observed. My mom used to say she hated her bedroom because she confessed how she woke up sometimes, thinking there was somebody next to her, not my stepfather. Chills. When I came back in my room, my friend was scared as hell, her face was blank, and she told me she saw something by the window. My theory was it was a bird, probably an owl. Anyway, the creepy feeling was mutual. One of the craziest episodes was a party. We spoke with 2 friends near a door and mirrors. There was this Buddha statue. We were calm, no drugs. Then all the mirrors fell, and the head of the statue has been sliced. The rest of the body was still standing. Everyone was shocked and asked us what just happened. Maybe it was a temperature problem, but it was just a regular April night, and I don't remember any weird weather issues. And there's this story about the freaking TV. We changed our TV over and over again, the screen used to activate itself and change channels even when we were watching something. Some technicians explained it was something they could not fix easily, since the system was a bit old. Did I mention the mirror in the bathroom? I know, right? It's so cliché. I never saw ghosts in the mirror, but it was always dirty, even if we cleaned it daily. Reminds me of the cross stuff. Anyway, I live in my own flat with my fiancée now, and it's a cool atmosphere here. But sometimes, I remember some nights in this yellow house. Whether they were ghosts or not, something from those nights still haunts my memories. My house is slightly haunted. I was born and raised and still live in a haunted house. It's only slightly haunted now, but when I was little, it was terrorizing. I'd like to share a few memorable experiences I've had over the years. When I was about 5 years old, one night I was lying in bed and saw the clothes in my closet gently sway back and forth. Soon, wispy white hands came up from underneath my bed and pulled the sheets and blankets down, pinning me in bed. I was utterly petrified. My heart is racing as I write this. My 5-year-old logic said that if I couldn't see my closet, then those hands wouldn't pin me down in bed again, so I moved my bed. Unfortunately, moving my bed so it wouldn't face my closet meant moving my bed closer to the closet. I wasn't thinking about that. I just wanted the monsters under my bed to go away. I still experienced being pinned down in bed, but I didn't see those hands anymore. Fast forward a few years, and I am about 12 years old. My older sister was now experiencing paranormal activity, but it was limited to a Black Panther-like creature that stayed in a corner just watching her every night. The other side of the wall of that particular corner happened to be my closet, by the way. Anyways, my sister and I didn't get along very well. She and I are complete opposites. She has red hair and blue eyes and is extroverted, whereas I have dark brown hair and green eyes and am an eternal introvert. I say that because sometimes she would come into my room and irritate me as I was trying to go to sleep. One night, I was lying in bed and felt a hot breath on my neck. I slept on my stomach, so I couldn't see who was breathing on me, but the smell was absolutely horrible. It reminded me of rancid meat. I thought it was my sister because she had the most horrible morning breath I've ever smelled in my life due to drinking milk before bed. I digress. I thought it was her, so I groggily whined for her to leave me alone and stop breathing on me. The breath kept coming, and I could feel the presence of someone or something standing over my bed. When I lifted my head, nothing was there. I thought my sister had run back into her room, so I got up to go yell at her to stop bugging me. When I walked into her room, however, I found her sleeping, and it was clear that she had been asleep for quite some time. In 2000, my family moved from the house to another city for my dad's work, but we kept the house and ended up moving back in 2006, which happened to be my first year of college. My mom had an experience that convinced her the house was haunted, and it scared her so awful that she went through the house praying and pleading the blood of Jesus over the place. When I came home for a visit, I noticed the air was different. The feeling that something was stalking you wasn't there anymore, and the air didn't feel like it could be cut with a knife. The paranormal experiences have started to come back over the last couple of years, but they aren't at the same level of scary as previously. I've heard a man talking to my cat. I've had someone scream in my ear so loud it woke me from a deep sleep. My mom has seen a shadow figure of a man in a hat and a trench coat walking through her bedroom. I've experienced what it's like to have someone crawl into bed with me and put an arm around me. My mom and I have heard marching band music from speakers connected to a radio that isn't plugged in and doesn't work. I've asked our resident spook to turn a light off in another room and personally watched the light switch get turned off. The most recent experience was on Thanksgiving Day in 2019. I was putting the Christmas tree up after dinner and felt the sensation of someone putting their cold fingers on my neck and sliding them down my spine. So, I guess you could say I live in a haunted house. I witnessed a ghost sighting in Vista or Mosa. Hello, I wanted to share my experience and see if anyone has experienced anything similar. Back in 2016, I used to frequent Vista or Mosa in Los Angeles after the park hours. I was young and adventurous and would simply drive out there and jump the fence from the back street. Sit on the bench. Smoke a blunt, enjoy the night lights, and then head back home. I always sensed a presence, that I wasn't alone, but I always mentally told myself he was just paranoid and high and didn't think much of it. It never showed itself until I visited with someone else. Here's the story of that night. Upon jumping, like I always did in the past, I met a gray cat on the stairs. I'm not one to be scared of animals, but it was weird to me that the cat didn't move, or flinch, or run away, like normal cat behavior. It stared right back at me until I was about 2 steps away and then jumped in the water/pond area. Also, I must state, the cat had green eyes that glared bright in the reflection of the light. Anyways, we walked to sit on the bench and sparked up the blunt. I couldn't shake off the feeling that someone was watching. Sure enough, when I turned back, I saw a white figure playing peekaboo from one of the bushes located across the field from behind the bench. At the first glance, I thought it was just a homeless person in the park with a painter's uniform. Painters were all white, and didn't get scared. It was after the third time I looked back, each time they hid back in the bush, that I told the person I was there with that I felt uneasy and we should go. Without hesitation we turned off the blunt, both got up, and made our way back to the exit from where we came from. As we were approaching the stairs again, the white figure crossed us, but the whole time it was their back. We were about 20 feet away, and in a split second, the figure dropped onto all fours, hands and feet, and then did the exorcist type of walk. It looked back towards us, and I saw the same exact glare the cat's eyes had. In that moment I felt my heart stop. I was scared. I asked the person I was with if they had seen that. Their response was what? Then I said that, pointing toward the figure, but when they turned to look, it was gone. I find it interesting that it decided to show itself as we were exiting the park. And I find it even more interesting that it decided to show itself only to me and the one time I decided to visit with someone else. I'm wondering if anyone has had any similar experience there? Or similar to my story? Please let me know. I would love to hear yours. Thanks. The Demon House of Dermody Street. The paranormal has surrounded and fascinated me since I can remember. Whether it be a spirit passerby in a haunted house I've lived in, visiting a haunted place for my somewhat successful YouTube channel, or a passed-on family member coming to visit. A lot of my interest came from my father's side of the family and their apparent proneness to the supernatural. This is one story my paternal grandmother and others told me that is 100% real, some of which I have verified and seen with my own 2 eyes and ears. My grandmother's father had owned a small 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in San Lorenzo, California, ever since my grandmother could remember. It was located on a cul-de-sac named Dermody Street. It was built in the 1930s and was a quaint little thing. When my grandmother was 15, she and her best friend, who lived just across the street, had started playing with a Parker Brothers Ouija board in the back bedroom. This was in 1962, and back then, these were just popular board games, thought to be harmless at the time, used as a magic 8-ball of the time, if you will. They asked it questions such as, "Who am I going to the prom with?" Or "Does Darren like me?" For a while, nothing would happen, but as they progressed in its use, the Ouija started to answer them. Of course, they just wrote it off as the other girl moving the planchette and laughed it off. Eventually, they stopped using it, however, whatever was talking to them wanted more attention. Now it's at this point when small things would start to happen. A seemingly disembodied voice here or there in whispers at night could be heard down the corridor. My great-grandparents had a strange habit of recording their conversations in the living room, possibly to reminisce or for future generations to hear, maybe. But these things could be heard in the background of these recordings. Eventually, things began to escalate. Poltergeist activity, such as things moving or even being thrown off surfaces. My family were scared out of their minds. There is one event in particular that lives in infamy. It was Christmas time of 1963, just a week or so after President Kennedy was assassinated, some of which could still be heard from their black and white RCA television. My great-grandmother was listening to it as she was on a 6-foot-tall stepladder, attempting to decorate the approximately 9-foot-tall Christmas tree they just picked up. As she was trying to place an angel on the top of the tree, she was violently thrown sideways right across the room, crashing into the wall and landing on the TV. From then on, they were deathly, almost literally, afraid of the house. Things just got even worse. They began to fight constantly, which fed this negative entity further. Eventually, crucifixes began to go missing or get upturned, and one in particular, in front of the back bedroom wall in the hallway near where the Ouija board was used, started to actually drip blood. That's when my great-grandparents decided to contact their local priest, who quickly came to bless the house with holy water, sage, and prayers. As soon as the ritual was finished, they felt very uncomfortable and in the next few days decided to abandon the house and lock it up for good. They moved out with all their possessions, both physical and demonic, inside. Fast forward 40 years or so to around late 2004. My great-grandfather still owned the house on Dermody Street. My great-grandmother passed away in 1986, and in his old age, he gave the deed to my grandmother. The very same who played with the Ouija board. She rented it out to her daughter, my aunt, and her kids, my cousins, since they had been living with her in their house in Union City for pretty much ever and wanted a change of scenery in their own space. My aunt opened the door for the first time since 1964. The house smelled of must and mold. Dust covered the floors, tables, and appliances. A white 1951 RCA tabletop radio was still playing music in the other back bedroom. Nothing but antiques sitting in darkness. She had heard the stories but didn't care. Within the month, they had quickly refurnished, keeping many of the original items in the house, and made it their home. My grandmother's friend, the one who played with the Ouija, still lived across the street and came to visit periodically. Everything was normal. It was wonderful, actually. This is when I first set foot in that house. I was nearly 10 years old, and I always felt the slightest discomfort. I knew the stories, they interested me. I even saw the old dried brown blood on the wall, which ran down from the crucifix that still remained in its place. Besides the knowing and the feeling, all was well. I spent many a day playing outside with my cousins and little brother, on our bikes and drift trike we had. I even enjoyed listening to the calming sound of the BART train's loud electric motors whizzing away at night to and from the monorail station right across the huge parking lot that was now just behind the house's backyard. Then one day not long after my great-grandfather passed away in April 2005, my eldest cousin, Victor, who was almost 14, began to vomit violently outside as we were playing in front of a large dead oak tree. My aunt just thought it was the flu, and I recall many days he spent inside, watching his favorite Star Wars and Harry Potter movies and drawing while eating chicken noodle soup and drinking ginger ale. Things got worse, though. He began to become pale, his voice became weak, and his energy was drained. His aunt decided to take him to the ER. They ran many blood tests before they found the results. It was cancer. I don't remember what kind, but I do remember they recommended St. Jude's Children's Hospital as the best place for him to be. Once he was admitted there, they found he had 2 other types of cancer as well. Within months, going from perfectly healthy to 3 cancers, what was going on? He spent the remainder of his days there before passing away on September 24th. My aunt always blamed St. Jude's for not doing enough quick enough, as originally it was not terminal. But I blame something else. To this day, I still feel as if the house did it. I believe that all the dormant negative energy, just soaking in itself for 40 years, undisturbed, and then just let out in an instant, it did something. I still don't know why it was to him, though. As I'm writing this, and I'm not religious at all, but I do recall a story of Moses in Egypt, who was a prophet of God, who rained down terrible curses upon the land until his people were free from slavery. One of them was the ending of all the firstborn sons. From my experience with demonic entities, they like to mock the holy, like getting scratched 3 times to mock the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Could this have been another, more vague mocking? Or was it all coincidence? Other things did happen afterwards. Seeing shadows and hearing voices, but they weren't negative in feeling. They were pleasant. I do believe it was Victor, watching over his home and family. Over the years, I found out more about the house. I found a half-burnt TV guide under dirt from 1964 that I dug up in the backyard while metal detecting. I figured that at one point my family tried to burn items to rid themselves of or please the angry spirit. And my other cousin, Priscilla, and I did manage to locate those recordings my great-grandparents made in the 50s and 60s. We were able to play them on the old player recorder that was still in the garage, and yes, we heard the voices and whispers. It still haunts me to this day. The last time I visited the house was in 2010. My aunt and cousins ended up moving back into my grandparents' house in Union City to take care of my grandmother, who had a stroke and pretty much became fully disabled, after my father had ended self due to that and other things. I'm still not sure if that could have been related or not to all the happenings in the house or the long-time dormant negative energy attached to it. But man, was I happy to see that green Dermody Street sign in the rearview mirror. Babies' cries in Dead End Alley. When we reached 10 years old, my cousin and I were allowed to play on the street just outside my auntie's house. There was a busy lane that ran down beside the side of the houses where all the kids used to run up and down, kick a football around, ride their bikes, and generally mess around. I liked it because I had a long walkway to practice pushing my wheelchair without the danger of the main road, and my cousin, our friends, and I spent hours of fun running and wheeling up and down that lane. There was a funny little dead-end alley just leading off the lane, which always had a weird vibe around it. There was only one house at the end of the dead-end alley, as all the kids used to call it. The house was different from all the other houses around it. The others were bright, colorful, and cheerful, full of life with neighbors talking over the fences with one another, and always ready to tell us kids off, tongue-in-cheek, for making too much row, a typical slang term for noise in West London. The house down dead-end alley was always dark. Even on a sweltering hot summer's day, it always seemed to have a gloom hanging over it like a dark ominous cloud. Obviously, we, being merely 10 years old, were banned by my mama and aunt from going anywhere near the alley, let alone the empty, abandoned house, although my older cousin and his mates, who were 13, hung around dead-end alley from time to time with the sole purpose of frightening his little sister and me with horror stories of the house and its imaginary monstrous inhabitants. Having heard rumors about the dark history of the house, although not knowing anything concrete, The house had the dubious reputation as a haunted house. One typical summer's day, my cousin and I were playing in the lane with our friends. We kept hearing a baby crying. Now, being in the middle of a council estate, it is not uncommon to hear a baby cry, so we paid no attention. However, as the afternoon wore on, the baby's cry became louder and constant, almost deliberate. That got our attention, and we all decided to investigate the noise, so we stopped playing and began to look around. To our horror, after searching for the source of the noise, we realized that the baby's cries were originating from the front garden of the dead-end alley house. One of our friends who was slightly older said he would go nearer to have a look. We were all concerned by now, as it seemed obvious to all present that it was a real baby who was in distress, but everyone present also pleaded with him not to do it, but he was, and still is, a very principled, moral person, and his conscience overcame him. We waited for 10 minutes until he came back. He looked awful, his face was white as a sheet, and he looked physically shaken. He told us that he went into the garden, but there was no sign of a baby anywhere. His best mate asked him if he saw anything else, and he just nodded and said, "I don't want to talk about it." Nobody forced the issue. In fact, I think everyone was secretly relieved about it. We left very quickly and returned to the safety of home. Years after, my cousin and I were talking to her mom, and she began to tell us about the history of the local area. The subject of the dead-end alley house came up. We were horrified by what my auntie told us. It still gives me chills talking about it now. In the 1940s, the area where their family lived was way more rough than it is present day, with lots of domestic violence, gangs, prostitution, and unwed mothers. Also, a high pregnancy rate, which is to be expected in some ways, what with the war. Along with it came a fair percentage of unwanted babies. It turns out that the house in Dead End Alley was a baby farm, where women took their babies that they couldn't look after or didn't want, women or couples, and for a fee, they would take these abandoned infants in and find good homes for them. It was said by the locals that the couple running the baby farm were quite an unsavory pair, and there were rumors at the time of coercion and intimidation of young unwed mothers to give the awful couple their babies and neglect and abuse of their young charges. Then the scandal was uncovered. In the 50s, my auntie didn't know the full facts. The remains of several infant bodies were found in the front garden in a shed where the husband kept his gardening tools. The couple was obviously charged with murder, and because of the number of remains discovered, they were put away for a long time. We don't really know what the truth is of what happened that hot summer's day long ago, but my cousin and I have our theories. My cousin still lives in the same house with her family and my auntie, and every time my husband and I visit them, I still get the chills when passing by Dead End Alley, and our friend who went to look for the distressed baby, who my cousin and I are still friends with, has never revealed what he saw in the garden of the Dead End Alley house. My experiences at Bachelor's Grove, very haunted, cemetery. I'd like to share a number of little anecdotes from my dozens of times being at the notoriously haunted, and long abandoned, cemetery, Bachelor's Grove. I think they rival a lot of the stories to come out in the last 20 years about experiences in that cemetery. For one, among the first times I went to the cemetery, which is situated in the middle of a forest preserve, it was with friends, and we saw the notorious disappearing house, or at least one of them. We didn't even know it wasn't supposed to be there. Once we had spent our time in the cemetery, we continued walking west, past a stream that ran through the area. We walked for some time, and I even took a photo inside of a nearby well where this house apparently was attached. This was in approximately 2001. The house that most people have reported is said to be white, but what we saw was brown. It did look as if it had candles lit in the windows, and it had a sheltered porch area. The more we walked towards it, the more it stayed the same distance from us. We were so preoccupied with looking for ghosts that we did not even realize that the house wasn't supposed to be there. And we didn't put it together for some years after, including several other visits without consequence and one with an especially large amount of consequence, at least for me. After I heard about the disappearing house in 2004 or so, I brought multiple friends back to try to locate it, and we never did. One time in 2014, a friend and I walked for 5 hours in the thick of the woods, off the paths, past the cemetery, and past the nearby stream. And the more we walked, the more the view of the Midlothian Turnpike, i.e., the end of the forest preserve, stayed the same distance from us. Finally, we gave up and turned around, and we got back to the cemetery entrance within 20 minutes. That forest preserve is about a 3-block radius if you look at a map. There is no logical way we walked for that long without coming out the other side. On Friday, June 13, 2003, I was still something of a skeptic. I went to spend the night at the cemetery by myself because I thought I'd never see anything. I snuck into the forest preserve area past a small radio antenna/tower because I knew there would be police stationed at the main entrance to prevent trespassers, and there were. By this time, I'd been there so many times, I knew the place by heart. I quietly snuck onto the main path just past the entrance once I'd walked through the woods for long enough, dressed in all black and with a good deal of adrenaline. I didn't even have a flashlight, but I found that I didn't need one. The moon was so bright and full, yes, it was a full moon on Friday the 13th, that I didn't need a flashlight. I walked around a fair amount. I was thankful that for some reason there was no mud and no mosquitoes, and the weather was a bit brisk but not too cold. I am fairly certain that I arrived at the cemetery around 11 p.m., and nothing occurred until approximately 2 a.m. However, at that time, a series of events unfolded, and it was truly beautiful. I sat at a grave that had been dug up in the 60s, so it was a bit of a pothole. I believe it was the Newman grave. I tried to settle in, but I was on high alert for the entire time, until I did actually start seeing things. Many people have horror stories of shadow figures and deep negativity, but what I saw was so blissful and warm, it made me really happy, and I've always associated that warm feeling with the place since then. It began with me seeing two people slow dancing in a circle, patiently, gracefully, and almost menacingly. It was a bride and groom in old-fashioned regalia, the groom with a top hat and coattails, and the bride with a white wreath on her head. They were too far away to see too many details, but the intensity with which they gazed into each other's eyes was not only implicit but undeniable, so much so that I felt I could hear the music, although I knew I couldn't. It is natural for a skeptic to assume that this was merely a mirage, the eyes playing tricks in the moonlight, but it's hard to explain how bright everything was. The moon was not only luminescent, but everything had a slight glowing hue to it, which allowed me to make certain that this couple in the distance, dancing their mesmerizing dance near the entrance to the cemetery, was not my eyes making something out of nothing. The more clarity I felt, the more happiness I felt. I felt as if I was connected to all of the families who had come to have picnics and visit their loved ones, since this was, after all, referred to as the cemetery in the park at one point. White orbs began to float around in the area, and they didn't seem to be representative of bodies, but they were smaller. They looked like what Disney movies portray lightning bugs to be, basically clusters of white superballs floating in the air. There was not only a glow but also a sort of fog in the trees, and most of the orbs that I saw were up in the trees with what looked like light mists of glowing white smoke. To my left, a large glowing red light crept up over the lagoon in the nearby Midlothian Turnpike. It looked like red spotlights were coming up out of the lagoon, lots of them. The side of the road next to the lagoon was immersed in red light going straight up to the sky. I kept waiting to hear an ambulance, but I heard nothing. I didn't even hear crickets for a while. Combined with the moonlight, these new red lights gave me even more light to see, and on the ground, I saw a broken carriage and a dead horse. I want to be clear that it was bright enough to make these things out clearly. The carriage was pretty smashed up, but it was still recognizable as a carriage. I did not know of any sort of history where a horse and carriage ran into the lagoon and both died for no apparent reason. I heard that years later. Another thing I will say is that there are stories of a yellow man, which is to say, apparently some Dick Tracy type of character walks around in a yellow overcoat. I did not see that exactly, and I never heard of it until recently, but what I did see was a glowing yellow humanoid figure that would walk for a few steps and then explode into pieces, then reform as a bunch of orbs that rapidly coagulated, walk a bit more, and then explode. All of this happened in a manner as if it were indifferent to me. This stuff continued to go on, uninterrupted, for at least 2 hours. I sat in the moonlight and sketched what I was seeing at one point, and that was just as things were beginning to develop. What I did also sketch were potential mirages, to be clear, but that was before the red light really kicked in. It was not all peachy keen throughout the night, though. I had heard of the shadow figures and hooded figures, and naturally I was worried about ritual abuse and devil worshippers that are rumored to be about the area. What I did see were hovering hooded figures moving back and forth about the fence area, paying particular attention to the entrance. They zoomed back and forth over and over, and that made me pretty nervous, but they seemed more like guardians than antagonists. What made me more nervous was that I began hearing animals screaming. I specifically heard a dog screaming in pain, and it felt like it was very close to me, but I could not see it. The dog didn't seem to want to hurt me, but I did not move from my spot at that gravestone until the sun began to come up. Just before that happened, it was as if a dimmer switch had turned everything down, and it all faded from view as the crack of dawn only slightly began to creep through the moonlight, at which point I walked to a nearby diner, had breakfast, and came back to the cemetery to take pictures with a disposable camera. Naturally, not one photo came out. They were all completely black. I would like to add that this experience was so profound for me that it slowly became the impetus for me to become a psychic as well as a certified hypnotherapist, essentially because the trance state that was involved on this night was so extraordinary and undeniable. Thanks for your consideration. Strong presence at Pioneer Village. I visited the Spring Mill Park in Indiana this weekend. I've been to it many times before, as I live close, and I've never felt anything this strong before. Some of the buildings were taken from another village or made as replicas, but some were originally in the village when it was in use. I got the urge to start up my spirit box. The first clear word was buried. At first, I thought this was just referring to being buried in the ground, but after some historical research, I might have been mistaken. There was an outlaw who lived in the village who was constantly trying to make amends with his family, who disowned him for his crimes. He brought them stolen money, but they refused it, so he buried it in the county. Most people believe the treasure was buried in the village, leading many to obsessively dig for it. Some other paranormal investigators saw apparitions digging and got the word buried or treasure frequently. This could have been a coincidence in my mind, so I dismissed it. Then the spirit tried to take me somewhere. It told me to go to the circle. Sure enough, there was a definite circle in the village. I guess I went to the wrong one because it clearly told me, no, that's a mistake, go to the opening. I don't know what I was being led to, but I got this gut feeling to stop and turn off the box and get away. I felt off for the rest of the day. I'm really hoping I find someone who can talk to me about what I experienced on Mountain Road, Warinaki, in 2018. My partner and I were on our first roadie together as a couple. We had spent 3 weeks together in the back of his '96 Surf Hilux and were starting to make our way back to the lower north. We were taking the Twin Coast, which is gorgeous and scenic. We'd had a big night the night before, and were stopping regularly for naps/water, etc. It was blistering hot. One of those Northland days where you know even the shade won't help you with the sunburn. Squinting underneath your sunglasses, bright and cloudless. We saw the sign on the left Mountain Road with a rest stop, toilets, a hostel, and a short loop walk, which sounded like a bit of us. Turned left, the road quickly turns to gravel, no dramas. The road continues and turns into a pretty much vertical gravel road. Okay. The road continues, and there has been a washout. The road becomes windy, single-laned, and full of massive ruts. Oh well, good thing we're in a 4WD. We drove up this road for about 15 minutes, with no sign of a rest stop or anything. Just sheer cliff face, this diabolical road, and loads of bugs. The cicadas were so loud you could hear them over the engine of this very much struggling vehicle. No room to turn around, and we're trying to get Google Maps up, no service. We get to an extra hairy point, so I get out of the car to help my partner traverse. As I'm standing on the bank, I look down the sheer rock face and see a pallet with, like, a makeshift bright white shade sail over it. Cool, I thought, someone must live nearby or something. If we get really stuck, maybe there will be someone who can help. As I'm looking, I sort of start seeing shapes appear. I suddenly realize I'm looking at two children with bright white hair dressed in white flowy tunics/dresses. I'm staring at them, and they are staring at me. I wave politely and call out something about the car. They just say nothing and stare at me. Right, I thought, we are in the WAPs, she'll be right. Wrong. Managed to get the car up a bit further, so I hopped back in. We carried on driving. No sign of this lodge that was supposed to be here, and we are thoroughly perplexed at this point. As we keep driving though, we notice more of these little makeshift shade sails. My partner gasps and points up at a group of 6 bright blonde-haired children, again, in white dresses. I recount my experience to him. He looks deeply concerned. When all seemed lost, we finally came to a clearing with an overgrown DOC sign, 6-foot track. We turn the old gal off for a break and make a brew in the back. The cicadas were deafening, and we observed our surroundings. No houses or signs of life. A pieced-out red Corolla, no windshield, covered in the dust from the road. It looked like it had been there for at least a decade. An old bus. A bus? I stared at the bus. I stared at the surf. I stared back at the bus. How the duck did a bus get up this road? There is no ducking way someone drove a bus up here. While I ponder, I gaze at the bus. It's very dusty, all the dust from the road is covering this thing head to toe. This is the only area that remains clear, as the windshield wipers have very clearly been turned on very recently. Crystal clear through the windshield. The sense of dread I felt was unparalleled. There still wasn't enough room for us to turn around, so we carried on past the 6-foot track. We're driving slowly. We're trying to keep the revs under the hum of the cicadas. As we round what was the final corner, we see About 50 meters ahead, a large black shape. Driving forward, I hear my partner exhale as if he had been holding his breath. Is that a horse? I squinted at it, it certainly was horse-shaped. But it was so still, it looked like a fake horse, which, in this moment, would have been infinitely creepier. The horse is standing on the right-hand side of a cattle grate, facing towards us. I have never seen such a black horse. Not a hint of white or brown, right down to its hooves. Just jet black. So black it looked out of place. Eyes unblinking, unmoving, obsidian spheres. It's not flicking bugs off with its tail, it's just standing there. The horse does not move. On the other side of the cattle grate, it looks like there is enough room to turn around. We drive the slowest anyone has ever driven across a cattle grate, scraping the driver's side wing mirror to squeeze past this horse. The horse does not move. Am I level with the horse? I stare at the horse. The horse stares ahead. It's like someone poured ice water through my heart and into my stomach. As we crest the hill after the cattle grate, we come across something that made my partner white-knuckle the steering wheel. A house? The house looked as though it had been built out of corrugated iron, no windows, just square holes in the corrugated iron. 2 stories. Thick ropes strung from the second story to the trees across the yard had oil barrels threaded on, those big blue barrels. They were all hanging at different heights, and some of the ropes also had tires hanging off them. Later that night, my partner would describe it as almost as if they'd gone with a nautical theme but had never seen a boat. I don't think the surf has ever made a turn that quickly. We go back past the horse in silence. We go back past the bus in silence. We go back past the platform where we had seen the 6 children, who were no longer there, in silence. Then, out of nowhere, a sign. A sign we had not seen prior, Okapico Lodge. Thank God. We drove in. Not a soul in sight. Okay, fair enough, we will find the campsite bathroom, and we will be on our way. My partner uses the toilet near the entrance. All we can hear are cicadas. I enter the bathroom, and mid-pee my partner says, "Oh, hi," he sounded uneasy through the door. "Hey yeah, sorry, we turned off for the rest stop and got a bit turned around further up the road and couldn't find the toilets. I hope it's okay we used yours?" A woman's voice next. We don't usually allow that." She sounds mad and wary of my partner, and I'm now the one using the bathroom she didn't want us to use. I finish up and get out. As I exit, the woman in front of me is evidently furious. I look to my right, the oldest woman I have ever seen is shuffling towards us with a walking stick. "Will you be staying the night?" I wish I was joking when I say this voice was straight out of a children's movie depiction of a witch or an old crone, haunting. My partner explains again, now the both of them are standing there, staring at us, furious. We make our apologies and begin backing down the hallway to get to the car. In the previously deserted car park/yard, there are now about 8 people standing in a line about 15 meters away. One on a quad bike, blocking the entrance. Neither of us heard a quad bike pull up. And where the hell did these people come from? We jump in the surf. The guy on the quad moves out of the way, and we start going to leave. The second the surf bursts into life, the wall of people begins walking, deliberately towards the car. In a line. Staring at us. I'm staring at them. One on a quad bike is laughing. Another with a pitchfork is using it to support himself as he walks towards us. All of them are fair-haired. "Drive," I said under my breath, tears beginning to well. We take off, faster than our ascent, and drive past the spot where I saw the 2 kids, who were now standing on the edge of the road, staring at us. I stared at them. And suddenly back onto the Twin Coast. It was like in a video game. The music changed the second you were out of danger. It was a very quiet drive down to Kaiwi Lakes after that. My experience inside a haunted mine. So I've been holding on to this experience for about a year now and have decided to share it with you guys mostly to get it off my chest. I work in a deep underground potash mine. For anyone who has never experienced what it's like to be several thousand feet underground, it is a very uncanny experience. There is no natural lighting, and usually the only artificial light comes from your cap lamp or any vehicles you're operating. You can hear the earth shift and the vast weight above you slowly bear down on the tunnel you're working in. I had been working underground for about 6 months and was being sent to an abandoned part of the mine to make it safe enough for crews to be sent in to recover some equipment and machinery that had been left behind. The area I was being sent in was infamous for being the location where a mine operator that I will refer to as Chris had been ended by being pinched in between 2 pieces of equipment. This accident had shaken a lot of the guys underground, and many refused to work in that area again. So as the junior operator, I was the unlucky bastard that had to go in. I was sent in by myself to get the job started and was supposed to get another operator to come help me once I was ready. The beginning tunnel had so much potash dust piled up over the years that it reached my knees and made it almost impossible to see while driving in my bolter, a vehicle that drives 8 feet metal bolts into the ceiling to prevent the ceiling from caving in. I remember feeling so uneasy while I was in there, like I wasn't supposed to be there. Once I got to my first location to start bolting, I began setting everything up. I was setting up bolts when I noticed a moving light come from the opposite end of the tunnel from where I had entered. I initially thought it could be another worker that was also doing work in that tunnel, so I started doing cap lamp signals, our own form of sign language with our lights so we can communicate. I signaled for whoever was making the light to come towards me. Once I made that signal, the light stopped moving and, after a few seconds, disappeared. I was becoming worried and tried to reason to myself what the light could be. It really couldn't have been another worker because it wasn't safe to go any farther until my work was done. It couldn't have been a piece of equipment because it responded to my light. I was terrified and honestly didn't know what to do. I was scared to attempt to leave because my bolter kicked up so much dust. But I also didn't want to go by foot because I'd only have my cap lamp for lighting. I decided to stay camped inside the bolter till my backup arrived. The light never returned, and when my coworker arrived, I gained enough confidence to finish the job and leave. I don't know what I saw, but I can't help but think it's the soul of Chris. The idea of his soul being trapped in that tunnel really bothers me, and I actually left the underground for a surface position partially because of this encounter. The new place. When my grandpa died, my grandma moved and bought a condo from this one elderly woman who had multiple husbands that died. Before we moved in with her, she was having weird occurrences there. I remember she told us that she'd be sleeping upstairs in her bedroom and waking up in the middle of the night. Someone was playing with her toes, like pulling them. She also said one night it was as if someone or something was pushing her bed against the wall with absolute force. She was experiencing strange occurrences and sensations. One night she said aloud, "Whoever you are, stop bothering me, or give me the winning lottery numbers." Whatever was bothering her stopped for a while. After we moved in, several events occurred over the years. My first occurrence there was when it was snowing in December of that year. I had just gotten GTA 5 for the PS3 and was playing it upstairs on my TV. It was 2 a.m., and I got this weird feeling to turn around as if something was watching me. I turned to my right. As soon as I looked, the sunroof fogged up more and more as I looked for a couple of seconds. All of a sudden, an imprint of, like, a mouth or a lip appeared fogged up on the sunroof. In a heartbeat I turned my PS4 off and ran downstairs where I sleep. Our dog always used to bark in the dark hallways of our house and keep backing up as if he saw someone or something. Another time, I was up by myself, and I had the lamplight on next to me. I went to turn it off and was on my way downstairs. As soon as I just finished shutting every light off upstairs, right as I opened the door to the basement and started to walk down the steps, I saw a light pop on in the corner of my eye. I turned, and the same lamp light that I was sitting next to before just went back on. I went to turn it back off and go downstairs to sleep. When my dad got up for work at 3 a.m., every light in the house was turned on, all the lamps, the kitchen, the bathroom ones, every light possible. One night I went to bed, and my family and I were all sleeping downstairs. It was 3 a.m., and my mom and I were on our phones, and we heard walking, footsteps upstairs, and closets opening and closing. No one was up there but my grandma. She would not be up at 3 a.m. We heard this for about 30 minutes on and off, somewhat faintly. Finally we got the courage to go upstairs, and no one was there. My grandma was fast asleep. The next morning we told my grandma. It occurred to her that the night before it happened was the date my grandpa died 5 years prior. One afternoon, while my dad was out and my brother was working, my mom and I went to pick up my brother from work. My grandma was the only one home. My grandma was aware that no one was home. She walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water and heard my voice calling her from the back room, "Grandma, come here." She knew I was not home, no one was. She stayed in the kitchen until we got home. One night my mom fell asleep on the couch upstairs watching TV. Couldn't tell you what time it was, but it was nighttime. She woke up and saw a young boy sitting above our TV set in the square space part of the wall, almost hiding. The boy looked at her and put his finger in front of his mouth like he was telling her to be quiet while he was playing hide and seek. One year around Christmas, we had all our Christmas presents under the tree. We had presents against the wall too, some stacked up. Everyone was in the kitchen, and I was just sitting on the couch in the family room looking down at my Nintendo DS. All of a sudden it sounded like someone picked up a box and threw it as hard as they could against the corner wall. I was convinced something had to have broken while I was looking up to see what happened. Nothing was knocked over, everything was exactly like it was. Everyone was talking in the kitchen, no one heard it but me, even though the sound happened around all of us. Strange. Growing up, my brother always got blamed for when things went missing. He used to eat food stored away in cabinets in the fridge and lie about ever eating it. One morning before high school, around 6 a.m., my bro and I were lying in bed, both of our phones were charging upstairs too. My mom opens the basement door and yells, "Anthony, what did you do with the peanut butter?" My bro goes, "I didn't eat any peanut butter, I don't know." They were arguing from the basement to upstairs at a distance. My mom randomly gets this message pop up on her phone saying, "Not everyone likes peanut butter. Not everyone likes peanut butter." It repeated twice, then went completely off her phone. She tried finding the message, and it was nowhere in her messages on her phone. It popped up with no phone number and completely disappeared after she had time to read it. She thought it was him, but then saw our phones charging upstairs and freaked out. Another time, around 8 p.m. at night, I was again playing my DS and downloading something on it. Everyone was in the basement, and my mom wasn't home yet from bowling. The TV was off, and clear as day, almost as if someone was face to face with me. I heard a very distinct hello, almost exactly like my dead cousin used to say it, and his same tone of voice right in front of me. My cousin Andy died years before this incident. I was really close to him. Occasionally while we're all in the basement sleeping late at night, I'll be playing PS4, and the door to the basement is closed, but every now and then it sounds like someone is pressing their body up against the door to the basement. It's a weird sound I don't know how to describe. Just last year I was playing PS3 downstairs and came upstairs at 2 a.m. to obtain something to eat. As I opened the door to the basement to come upstairs, I saw a ball of light hovering over my kitchen table. All the lights were off, so obviously it was really noticeable. As soon as I got a glimpse of this ball of light, it was almost as if I wasn't supposed to see it or was intervening. It quickly swept in the direction of my family room and disappeared after that, never to be seen again. Even today I feel like someone is touching my body with their hand lightly at night, and no one is next to me. A weird thing that happened a lot since we moved in about 8 years ago, everyone's clothes started going missing and randomly appearing days later, especially mine. Sometimes I wouldn't find them for months, and they would just randomly appear out of the blue. It would piss me off a lot. It was the very last thing that happened. We were all downstairs sleeping. At 3 a.m., my mom received a call on her cell phone from my grandma, who was asking why the neighbor was in her bedroom and why she was hiding from her. My mom and I ran upstairs, and my grandma was startled, but no one was there in her room with her. My grandma kept saying she was hiding, but she said this woman had red hair and said 3 words to her, but she forgot what the woman said. She thought it was the neighbor because she couldn't think of another logical explanation, even though the neighbor doesn't have red hair. The scariest part of all these stories is, I'm still living in that house today. We haven't had an occurrence since. We did nothing to stop it either. The more I got involved with God and educating myself on spirits and demons and whatnot, the more they stopped bothering us randomly. I'm not saying that had any tie to it, but the coincidence is impeccable. Just like God knows us, so do the devil and demons. Why do you think they can mimic your voice, your appearance, and things you'd say? Why do you think you get tempted to sin? Nightmares from them? They know what you love, what you fear, and how to break you. They try to separate you from God, and if you're already a non-believer, they don't bother trying to separate you, for you are already an easy target for them. Yes, it would only make sense for the evil that tries destroying your life to learn all there is to know about their targets, which is us, but God gave us life to live abundantly and not in fear. The one who created us all and chose us and breathed life into us will forever protect us if we let him. It's worked for me. I never fear evil, nor will I, for I know I would just call upon God and God's word if I ever lived in fear, for God's word is powerful. When I say I stopped getting activity in my house after educating myself more and seeking out God and Jesus more, I mean it, no coincidence. Because the closer you are to God, the more you come to life and know yourself, and the devil fears how God will use you for his plan. I would be honored, for even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I cover myself in the precious blood of Jesus Christ. I command you to show yourself in the name of the true Lord Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. I cover you in the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Begone, demon, for I rebuke you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Every morning, say, I put on the armor of God today. Nothing can hurt me, for God is with me. Use God's words from the Bible. They hate that. All evil trembles in the name of the Lord, and they fear you if you know how to use it, for in God's words, we have power. There was a restaurant in Sausalito, California, that overwhelmingly felt like walking straight into The Shining. My husband and I had brunch there, on our way from SF to Sonoma, about 15 years ago. It was a busy, touristy Saturday. Tons of people. The entrance was rather cave-like, it was either dark rock or dark brick. As the hostess led us to the back patio, a weird cement pad with a plastic corrugated ceiling, the vibe, I can only describe it as feeling sickly. Yellow? Escalated. Once we were on the enclosed patio, it was like kablam, another dimension. Everyone working there, all the staff, was just off. The quality of light was, strangely nauseating. My husband, a true skeptic, was even disturbed. We ate a mediocre meal, served by a sleepwalking waitress. It was like everyone, customers too, was moving through invisible jello. We were quietly whispering about the creepy vibe and burst out laughing at the absurdity of it all. I mean, no one else was visibly picking up on this, so we started thinking it was just us. But then, a couple near our age, 40s, at the table over, they started laughing too and leaned over and said, "You feel it, too?" So, we paid the bill, got TF out of there, and have never forgotten it. My conclusion is that Sausalito is just weird. It's teeny. But, in the years since, I have tried to figure out the name of the joint, but can't figure it out. We paid cash. I tried Google Earth to find it, even on the streets. I know we didn't walk down, but I cannot find it. Spoke at length with someone who grew up there and knows the town backward and forward, and he had zero idea what place I was talking about. He later told me he also asked his adult sister, his mom, his grandmother. All Sausalito natives, and they had no idea. I guess we, and the other couple, slipped into a parallel universe, and that's that. A haunted house. My friends and I used to go mess around at an abandoned, winterized house in Mason, New Hampshire. This place was out in the middle of nowhere, with no neighbors close by and dirt roads to get to the home. This place was pretty cool but had been abandoned since 2005, according to all the boxes and papers that we had found. There was some Latin writing and a pentagram drawn inside the sunroom, and snake paintings on the wall. The rest of the house was pretty normal, besides obviously having been picked through. The bedrooms were a huge mess, and the living room was a huge mess. That's one of the reasons why we liked going there, because it was private and we could go through all the stuff there. There was always a negative feeling surrounding the area, though nothing ever happened. One day, my friends and I ventured into the basement, and there were metal chains, the kind that you strap your wrists into and have your hands over your head. There was a dark brown stain on the floor under it. Tons of chemical bottles, weird glasses, and other weird stuff on a workbench near the chain things. All of a sudden, I got this very bad feeling and what I'm going to call a telepathic message in my head, telling me to get out. So I told my friends I just had a bad feeling, and I was going to go outside. I quickly ran up the stairs, jumped the hole between the front door and the basement door, and went outside. I was just walking around out front waiting for my friends to come back up when I got this feeling that something was watching me. I looked around the wooded area and then glanced up at the house, and a white face was staring at me from the top window. Well, me being me, I freaked out, screamed, and ran away into the woods. I was gone for maybe 30 seconds before I gained my composure and walked back to the house. I glanced back up to that window, and the person/face was gone. My friends came up shortly after and asked me what was wrong, and I told them. The guys decided to go up and break the window, which I didn't condone, but I didn't want to cause any more problems. I just let it happen. We hung outside for another hour and went to go get into my car to leave, and it wouldn't start. I had a 1997 Saturn SC2. I continued to try starting my car, but it wouldn't even turn over. None of my lights came on, so obviously I had a dead battery, but I knew I didn't leave any of my lights on or the key on. We ended up sitting near my car while it was getting dark, trying to get through to someone so we could get picked up. One of my friends came up to me and told me to look in the top left window and asked me if I saw anything in there, so I looked, and I kid you not, there were these huge, giant, faint but dark red eyes just floating there, slightly moving back and forth like whatever it was breathing heavily. I told him what I saw, and he said that he thought he was going crazy. Anyway, we continued looking into the house while our other friends were trying to get service, and the thing never moved away from the window. About 30 minutes later one of our other friends came to pick us up, and we pushed my Saturn down to the lake that was maybe 5 minutes deeper into the woods. There was absolutely no service in that area, which is why we didn't move my car first. The road was all downhill, so my car glided easily there. One of the main reasons we moved it was so that if the police went to the house for whatever reason, I couldn't get trespassing or anything, and so a tow truck could find my car. I had my car towed to my shop the next morning so they could get me a new battery, and they ended up calling me and telling me something that made my heart drop, and I never went back to the house after this. Both of the fuse boxes in my car were blown. All the fuses. They had to replace all the fuses throughout my car, and no one could find anything wrong with my car electrically besides that. I knew it was the negative entity that did it, but obviously I wasn't going to tell the shop that. I have always been able to feel entities. I can walk into a house and be able to feel if it's haunted or not, and I can also feel people's emotions. A couple of months later, my friend happened to send me a photo of the house, and there were two little shadows in one of the side windows. We think they were children. He asked me if I remembered a black box they had found and burned. Two of the boys wouldn't let anyone else see it. He told me it was a box of nastiness, and that's why they burned it. He thinks that whoever owned the house abducted children, photographed them, and then ended them. A haunting in eastern Texas from early 2010. I've always had some kind of connection to the other side. Growing up I saw shadows, heard things moving at night, etc. In college I went to visit my birth mom and her new husband at his house in eastern Texas. This house, I learned, had been in his family for 100 plus years and had many deaths on the property. I was meant to stay with them for a few nights, but I only stayed one due to what happened. I learned that I was going to sleep on the couch that his ex-wife passed away on from cancer, his uncle died in a separate room, and his grandmother hung herself in the adjacent barn. Multiple hauntings occurred in this house, including two demon children that would scratch my birth mother's legs at night, unmarked graves that their tractor tires would fall into, the uncle that would sit at the kitchen table drinking coffee, etc. They had a fire because an unplugged heater caught fire and burned down their bathroom. The night I stayed there still makes me nervous to think about. It was around midnight, and I could not sleep. All of a sudden the power goes out, and it is pitch black and completely silent. I have my phone and am getting what little light it is producing, early 2010, and notice the blanket hanging over the doorway is moving. Next, I hear footsteps behind it. I start freaking out and run past this down the hallway to their room. My birth mom comes out and goes to the room and notices the lights at the neighbors are on and says, "You know they're just ducking with you, right?" She opens the door and yells, "Turn the lights back on." And on they turned. I left the next day. It was the most terrifying experience I've ever had. I remember you now. The terrifying words that haunted them for life. This is a story I heard from my colleague Ian. When he was a freshman in college, he and 4 close friends decided to go on a ghost hunting dare. The location, an abandoned hospital just outside the city in Massachusetts, was well known for its haunted reputation. It was precisely around midnight. They parked the car near the hospital entrance, and each of them grabbed a flashlight and got out. All the windows were shattered, and ivy covered the walls thickly, making it obvious the place had been vacant for a long time. Inside, the building was dilapidated with graffiti and trash, but in each room there were old magazines, beds, and even files that looked like patient charts. It was reportedly highly unsettling. While goofing around and exploring rooms at random, they eventually reached the 3rd floor. At that moment, Kyle, who was then a junior in college, suddenly came up with a completely outrageous idea. "Hey, how about we draw straws now, and whoever loses has to walk alone to the end of this floor's hallway?" The thrill-seeking members eagerly agreed. Ian, however, was clearly feeling quite terrified on the inside. And as it turned out, Kyle himself, the one who had proposed the idea, was the one who lost. Kyle had zero spiritual sensitivity and didn't even believe in those sorts of things. Although he said things like "this is messed up, seriously creepy," he advanced down the hallway without hesitation. The hospital wasn't that large, so as he marched forward, he quickly reached the end of the hallway. When he looked back, he saw the flashlights held by his friends swaying. Just as Kyle started walking back toward the light, he heard a slow creak behind him. A door was opening. His heart leapt. He tried to convince himself it was just a gust of wind or something, and Kyle turned his head to look back. Peering out was a middle-aged man in his 50s dressed like a security guard. "Hey there, kid. What are you doing in a place like this?" "What? A human?" Kyle relaxed, but the next moment, he saw the full body of that man step out of the room and was struck dumb. The man's body was grotesquely twisted. The upper and lower halves were misaligned, and his arms bent backward at the joints. Kyle let out a scream, more like silence than sound, and sprinted full speed toward his friends. The 3 waiting for Kyle at the hallway's end saw him screaming and running and laughed. "Wow, he's totally terrified." However, as Kyle drew nearer, they saw what was right behind him. No, behind Kyle, there was something. They let out screams and fled. Turning as they ran, they saw the man dragging his foot, chasing them at inhuman speed. This wasn't a dream or an illusion. It was real. There he was, undeniably present. Eerie footsteps and a deranged laugh echoed through the darkness. The four of them ran back to the car as if their lives depended on it. Hurry! Hurry! Start the car! Kyle, with shaking hands, inserted the key and started the engine. I remember you now. He looked toward the voice and saw the middle-aged man pressing his face against the car window, peering inside, eyes rolling crazily. Wow! Kyle slammed the accelerator. The car screeched and shot forward. None of them could clearly recall how they made it back, but ultimately, all four managed to return home. However, the next night, that man appeared in Ian's room. That night, Ian was lying on his loft bed but couldn't fall asleep. Then from below came a creak. Creak. Sound, the ladder being climbed. Oh God. Ian squeezed his eyes shut and tensed his body. Please go away. Don't come. Stop. Please. He repeated desperately in his mind. The sound stopped immediately, but Ian couldn't let go of his tension and stayed frozen for several minutes. Are you still there? Have you gone? He exhaled, trembling, and slowly opened his eyes. Just inches away in front of him, nearly brushing his nose, was that man's face. The man was straddling Ian, elbows pressed on both sides of his face, staring down with wide-open eyes. When the man met Ian's gaze, he cocked his head and said, Nope. And then he just vanished. Ian lost consciousness right then and there. The next day, Ian told the other three about everything. They said that besides Kyle, the other two had similar experiences. Strangely, Kyle alone had experienced nothing. I didn't feel anything last night, but since then, I've been feeling sick. Indeed, Kyle looked visibly pale that day. Ever since then, Kyle became astonishingly listless and began ignoring invitations from Ian and the others. But nothing drastic happened, and eventually, Kyle graduated and moved on. Years later, after graduating college and joining his current company, Ian had nearly forgotten that ghost hunting night. That was until one of his old ghost hunting buddies reached out. Apparently Kyle had broken down and had been hospitalized for about a year. Ian and the others went to visit him in the hospital, but Kyle's behavior was evidently strange. He looked terrified, always darting his eyes, and couldn't hold a coherent conversation. His family said that over the past few months, his mental age had regressed rapidly. By the time Ian visited, Kyle was functioning at about a middle school kid's level. Kyle reportedly said, "Someone's watching me. I always feel the stare." Suddenly, that night came rushing back into Ian's mind. A few months later, Ian visited again. By then, Kyle's mental age had regressed to around 4 or 5. Kyle, like a frightened child, cried repeatedly, "That creepy man. He keeps smiling and watching me. I'm scared. I'm scared." Several months after that, they received word that Kyle had died. He could no longer speak or eat and spent his final months bedridden, kept alive only by 4 fluids, until he quietly passed away. After Ian told me the story, he said quietly, "I wonder. Did Kyle see that middle-aged man right up to the end? Ever since I heard that story, I've never been able to do a ghost hunting dare again." This is my paranormal story. I grew up in a low-end suburban neighborhood that was built on a colonial battleground and backed by a tree line, where the old colonial home still stood. The upstairs wasn't finished, but as a teenager I didn't care. Had friends, video games, and my drums up there. I was fascinated by ghosts, watched the shows, got a voice recorder, etc. I was 10 when my parents and I first moved into our new home. The first paranormal thing I remember was playing in the kitchen, on the floor that was connected to the dining room, and seeing this weird discolored leg step into my field of view, causing a loud boom. More confused than scared, I chased after it, but the leg picked up, and I never saw the full body it was attached to. No one was in the house but me at the time, and since I was so young, it didn't really hit me what had just happened. Fast forward 6 years, and I am totally excited about ghosts. Start messing around at my friends' houses to try and find ghosts, and end up with a few cool photos that made people go This is about the time I start to realize that almost every day something would happen in my own home. In the unfinished upper floor you would hear someone walking around while no one was up there. The reason I hadn't thought, "Hey, that's a ghost," is my mom was firm about it being a raccoon and told me to drop it. Now some days I believed it was just critters messing around. However, there were the times it would sound like a full sports team was running back and forth, stomping around for 5 minutes straight in the middle of the day. I would go to my mom when it was going on, and she would get angry and say it's just squirrels or raccoons, so I didn't push it. For years, it went on upstairs. Little did I know something darker was attaching itself to me and my younger sister. We would both see shadow figures standing in our rooms and banging on the bathroom door when we were in the shower, and I even heard my mom's voice speak my name to me multiple times. Needless to say, we were pretty numb to paranormal activity at this point. We went about our normal lives. Both kids started becoming angsty teens, and that's when things started to develop interesting. I suffered from crazy nightmares most of my life and also have very strange sleep patterns. I have insomnia, but also since I was young, I do this thing where I will be lying on my stomach or side and pick up my arm, hold it in the air for a few seconds, and then drop it back down. The weirdest part is I didn't know I did this until college days when my then partners would tell me about it. Hardly believing it, I just went about my day until one partner asked my sister if I had any weird sleeping problems. Since my sister and I shared a room for most of our childhood, she knew the truth. I told myself and my partner, oh yeah, the arm thing that goes on for hours, the rolling around for hours, or the multiple times falling out of bed screaming and having my parents run in to see what was happening all while I was completely asleep. To say the least, I was shocked. I remembered some of the stuff, but due to life, I don't have the best memory from my childhood. When the nightmares started back up when I was 17, I would see this bipedal creature. The creature was completely black, with claws, a discolored black vapor outline, and yellow eyes. And a mouth that would open lower than a normal creature's mouth would, with teeth that were like knives all in different directions, and they were retractable. I would continue to see this thing in my dreams, and it would terrify me. It chased me in my own home in my dream and would travel through the shadows. In one dream it looked at me, went into the wall, traversed to where it was behind my mom, opened its mouth, and bit her whole top torso off. Needless to say, that didn't help my already terrible insomnia. Also, being an angsty teen with a vivid dark imagination didn't help anyone believe me, except for my sister. Sadly, I didn't believe my sister's paranormal events, even though they happened to me, as she was prone to making things up to get attention until one terrifying week. I had the normal nightmares, the normal stomping around upstairs, the normal whispers with no one there, and the normal mad mom who didn't want anything to do with it. In one dream the creature started talking to me. I don't remember what it said, but I had never heard it speak in a dream, and it had the same voice I had heard for years in my house. It is hard to explain what it sounded like, but needless to say, I started feeling less excited that this was a ghost haunting and something much darker. Later in the middle of the week, my sister tells us that while she was in the bathroom, she heard someone on the other side of the door again, but it was more aggressive. She stopped the shower, but the voice only got louder, and then the door started to get hit by this thing. My sister started crying and screaming for it to leave and to shut up. It then stopped banging and quietly started whispering in a different language, and so my sister moved her ear to the door. It then growled/roared at her, and she fell back from how frightened she was. She then gathered her courage, got dressed, and opened the door to run out. When she opened the door, she said she didn't see anything but felt a giant creature standing in front of her. We are both pretty sensitive to the paranormal, as you can imagine at this point. She runs out the back door through the kitchen, all while she hears this thing walking behind with loud booms with each step as it enters the kitchen and gets the shut door. She turns back to look at the door, doesn't see anything creature-wise, but sees the door start to get pounded to the point it is bending out a little bit. Needless to say, she ran around to her car and got in to go to her friend's house. The only problem was she forgot her keys. As we had been brought up Christians, though we had kind of fallen away from the church at this point, she dipped into what she was taught and started praying and saying in Jesus' name, be gone type stuff. She ran back in the front door and was greeted by booming footsteps coming from the kitchen and loud growls once more before she grabbed the keys and left. So terrified, she didn't lock the doors and ended up staying at her friend's house for about 6 to 7 months, only coming home when she wasn't alone. I was pissed this happened to her and even more mad that I didn't believe her when we were kids. We had gone through this alone, and after my parents divorced, my mom was gone all the time with her boyfriend and her work, so we never were completely comfortable talking about normal stuff, let alone this paranormal stuff that my mom wanted nothing to do with. Little did my sister know that the following day, while I was in the shower, I started to hear something from behind the bathroom door. I was so mad I hopped out of the shower and flew open the door. As I was alone in the house, I knew what it was, and I had had it with this thing leeching off my already broken family for years. As I stood in the doorway, I felt that creature standing in front, blocking the way out. I then was filled with adrenaline, and every hair on my body stood up. I began to walk towards it and started saying phrases to make it go away. I honestly have no memory of what I was saying, but if anyone came in, then they would have seen this angsty teen running around the house in the buff yelling random stuff at this invisible monster. After about 20 minutes of doing this, I stood there and felt a calm in the house I hadn't felt in a long time. I thought, hey, it's over. Then the following night came. My sister was gone, and my mom was out of town, so I had the whole house to myself. Told some friends I would hang later so I had some time to chill by myself and watch TV. It was dark and rainy outside, and the lights were kind of flickering from the storm, but I felt fine in the house. Now, at this point in my life, I didn't believe in orbs and always said it was dust, even though I had photos with crazy orbs in them, though this was before smartphones, so the photos sucked anyway. As I am watching TV in the living room, the lights flicker and the TV goes off, and out of the corner of my eye to the left in the dining room, I see some weird light above the table. I look towards it, and it has gone faster than it appeared. About 20 minutes go by, and the power goes out fully, and I quickly look over to the table and see this orb thing circle around the top of the table and then disappear super fast. Now, as a ghost/paranormal lover, I was super excited to see something with my own eyes I hadn't seen before. Most people who have seen paranormal stuff know it is hard to explain to others that you have seen something not of this realm, and seeing something firsthand is always an experience, both scary and oddly interesting. The power comes back on, and I turn the TV back on. So pumped from what I just saw, I stay at my house a little longer to see if it pops up again. A few minutes go by, and the power goes out fully again. I turn my head to face the table and wait for the orb to pop back up, but it doesn't. Instead, a large discolored black leg steps out from behind the kitchen area into the dining room, causing a loud boom. I then trace from toes all the way up to the torso and see the figure is solid but also has this vapor effect on its body, and that's when I see its face. It was the same face of the creature I had seen in my dreams, and it was looking right at me. Frozen in fear and in the complete dark with this thing, I just sit there and look on for what feels like an eternity. I can't see its full body because it only stepped out enough for me to see one full leg, one long arm with claws at the end, and then its left shoulder and its face. The creature looked like a beast/man hybrid, but its eyes were yellow and were glowing a bit. Also, it never blinked while it was looking at me. After a few seconds and being locked in place looking at this thing as it is looking at me, I think to myself, what do you want? That's when it opens its huge mouth, smiles at me, the scariest smile I have ever seen, and then steps back into the kitchen where it can't be seen. I jump up from the couch, run to my car, and dip to my friend's house. I didn't tell anyone, as I figured no one would believe me, but I told my sister. We then talked about all those years and figured out that not only was the land haunted from an old battle, but we had something attached to us when my parents got divorced. We figured it was from all the sadness we felt that drew the creature in. We also figure out that not only is the creature I saw the same one she has seen and the same one that had been in my dreams, but the leg I saw step out and make the loud boom in the kitchen when I was 10 was the same sound and leg I heard and saw when it stepped out years later. It had shown me first that it had been there all along. 2 years go by, and I am on my way to college. My sister has an apartment, and my mom is selling the house to move states away in with her now husband. I quit ghost hunting, and things started to calm down. We still had the people running upstairs in the middle of the day, with no one up there, but not anything as scary or as dark as what we had seen and been through. One day while cleaning the house to sell it, my mom and I are talking, and then we hear what sounds like a huge group of people running back and forth upstairs, so I call my mom and say, "So that's just raccoons, huh?" She then tells me no, they are old spirits who lost their way. I was shocked, she knew the whole time. She then said, "At least they don't attack you like him." Every hair stands up as she begins to tell me about a part of her family and childhood that I had never known. She was the youngest of 3 children born to a pastor and his wife. Extremely sheltered and controlled. She told me that there was this dark creature that would follow her and her siblings in their dreams and then torment them in their real life. My grandmother on my mom's side has some secrets that to this day the family doesn't want to talk about, but it is clearly not the truth she tells everyone. My mom told me she would rather not give it any more power over us because she knew we were struggling with the same thing that she had struggled with. To this day my sister says she still sees it from time to time, though I must have lucked out and haven't seen that creature since that day I saw it in full view. I am worried that my niece may be starting to see it, as she has shown signs of being terrified by something in the corner of the room. All in all I have seen full body apparitions, a few orbs, and stuff moving and hovering on their own, had things thrown at me, and heard weird stuff and my own name spoken by no one, but never have I been more afraid than when that thing stepped out, looked at me, smiled, and stepped back. Weird experiences in an old Italian home. So I want to preface this story by saying that I don't fully believe in ghosts. What I encountered was truly weird, and I can't really explain it to this day. I'm about 99% sure what I experienced was paranormal. Also, the happenings in this house only occurred for about 2 weeks until we had the house cleansed by someone. I'll explain that later. From 2019 to 2021 I served at Aviano Air Base in northern Italy in the United States Air Force. During my time there I moved into a house with a close friend of mine from tech school and his wife. We moved into an old house in the small town of Giais. In this house is where I went from not believing ghosts exist at all to becoming almost positive they do. I still don't fully believe because I don't think any of us truly have the answer for the weird shit that happens around us sometimes, and I won't claim to know exactly what it was that was going on in that house. The first week in the house was normal. After that first week had passed, I started having very intense nightmares every night. I do not remember what these nightmares were about, probably for the better. All I remember is waking up with sleep paralysis most of those nights, and that I do remember. Every time I have sleep paralysis, as soon as I realize what's happening, like clockwork, I get a quiet whooshing sound in my ears. It progressively gets louder until it's almost deafeningly loud. On one occasion I remember waking up in a cold sweat, not being able to move. The whooshing sound starts, and when it gets to the point of being fairly loud, I'm looking around the room, and at the foot of my bed I see a dark figure raising, and it starts lifting my legs off the bed. It was at that point I snapped back to reality, most likely from adrenaline. Now I know there wasn't actually a figure there lifting my feet. I was half asleep and dreaming that it was happening, but it felt so ducking real that I was genuinely terrified. I had more sleep paralysis experiences like that in that house, but that one was really the only one worth mentioning. My roommates also complained of nightmares, but nowhere near as intense or as frequent as mine. During the night when I would wake up after these nightmares, I would sometimes hear noises coming from downstairs. My roommates, who also slept upstairs, heard them too sometimes. These noises consisted of what I think were cabinets opening and closing as well as silverware and pots and pans being moved around, although I'm not entirely sure, as I didn't dare go out of my room to investigate. I was already shitting my britches from the nightmares. My roommates were more experienced with paranormal happenings and how to deal with them. They went to a store and picked up some dried sage as well as some sort of bead necklace for me that they said was for protection. Even though I was skeptical, I never took that damn necklace off if I was in that house. When I and my roommates tried to burn the dried sage in the house, it would not light, it wouldn't even burn a little, no matter how long we held the fire to it. The weird part is when we took the sage outside and tried to burn it again, it immediately lit on fire. We took it back inside and tried to burn it again, and the same thing happened, it wouldn't burn no matter how hard we tried. Now this could be due to humidity in the house or something, I'm not sure, but it really did creep us out a bit. Same night that we tried to burn the sage, me and my buddy woke up at the same exact time. We left our rooms and happened to meet in the hallway. We both wanted a midnight snack and it was quiet in the house, but as soon as we got close to each other and greeted each other, the noises started, the same noises I described earlier. Me and my buddy both stopped in the hallway above the stairs and just listened for a minute, just trying to decipher exactly what we were hearing when out of nowhere, and I really mean out of nowhere because both of us were standing completely still just listening. The necklace they had bought me exploded. It broke with nothing touching it or catching it. The beads scattered all over the floor. Me and my buddy just looked each other in the eye, said goodnight, and went back to our rooms. The final straw was when my roommates had apparently seen the entity. I'm not sure if I believe them entirely, but this is what they said they saw. When they were eating in our kitchen one day, they were at the table, both facing the glass door that leads to the patio. From that door in the reflection of the glass, you can see into the door to the hallway that sits right behind the table where they were. They claimed to have both seen an old lady walk past that doorway. They told me that neither of them said a word to each other, they just looked at each other and quickly made their way upstairs to their room. I say this was the last straw because after that encounter they called someone called a bucanero, I think is what they said. I can't remember, but it was some sort of Mexican priest or witch doctor who informed them that we were in danger and that he would perform a ritual to try and move the spirit from our house. I don't know what he did, but it ducking worked, and I was just glad to finally get a good night's rest in. After he did what he did, there was nothing happening in the house after that. We were even able to burn sage in the house after. This was my only paranormal experience to this day, and I'm still not sure what to think of it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. My experience with a paranormal house. I and my friends were going to stay at this 1940s Airbnb, which I didn't like the sound of. I mean, I don't like sleeping or living in old houses because I prefer houses from 2000 and up because I find them more comfortable, and who TF knows what happens in older houses. Someone could have been murdered where I was sleeping, and I hate old brick and wood type shit. Whatever, call me uncultured, see if I care. Back to the point, we arrived at the house, and I claimed a room in the back of the hallway, which had one queen bed, so weirdly, me and my friend slept in the same bed. The room has 3 windows and a closet. The TV is right near the door, and there's one little nightlight. I grabbed all of my shit and put it in the closet. We ventured around town for a bit until it got dark, then we got home, and I took a shower and got into bed. I was lying in bed watching my phone, and it was already about to die, so I decided to just watch it until it dies, and then I'll go to bed. While I am on my phone, I put it down for a second, and this is when the bullshit happens. So I lie there awake and hear a noise from the hallway. The door is halfway open, and I'm half awake because I was already tired from the shit I did earlier. I think to myself that the house is already old, it's bound to make creaking noises every once in a while. My phone then dies, and I'm left alone in the dark with the dimly lit hallway and my tiny nightlight as a light source. I get up, put on my slides, and walk across the room to plug in my phone, and while I'm doing that, I hear another noise, but it's from the hallway. It's a creak, but this time in the floorboard. I think nothing of it again and walk back to the bed where my friend is sound asleep. I experience minor insomnia and struggle to sleep in unfamiliar places because my mind remains alert. I'm lying in bed struggling to sleep when I hear another ducking creak. So I think now it's getting ducking silly. 3, really? I then hear the most ducking terrifying thing I heard all trip. The door to the restroom near my room in the hallway opened by itself, and it squeaked like a mother ducker. I am then in bed terrified and have the option between forcing myself to sleep, telling my friend and waking up the others and just getting the duck out of there, or grabbing my phone and staying up watching it. I choose the third because I don't want to sound like a crap. I then stay up suffering while looking into the hallway illuminated by a dim yellow light to stay alert. My phone died. I plug my phone in, wait until it reaches about 6% battery, then grab it again and continue watching. A few days ago, I was enjoying a restful sleep at a contemporary Holiday Inn while engaging in various activities typical of a bustling city, such as visiting the outlets and dining at an upscale restaurant. I eventually fell asleep, and when I woke up I felt a sort of relief, but night 2 got even worse, so I fell asleep the first night and woke up feeling terrible. I barely got sleep, but we all went and got dressed and headed to the main town. We wandered around and visited local shops and saw some cool museums. We got food and returned back to the Airbnb. Not to get off track, but on this trip we were doing an all-around the state venture around cities, so before this mayhem I had a good trip, and I was doing some cool big city and other shit. I went to outlet malls and went to cool places, but to get back on track, after we went shopping and got food, we returned back, and I was not having it, but again I chilled and decided to try and thug it out for the second night. I had a decent evening after eating and just walking around the house and chilling, then it became night. I was watching TV in the old, creaky, and unpleasant living room with my friends, and all of them said they were going to bed, so I decided to go to bed also. I put on my pajamas after showering and hopped in bed. For a while I was chilling in bed with my friend when he fell asleep and the shit show fiasco started. I repeated the cycle after my phone died. After a while I decided I should actually try and sleep, so I looked towards the hallway for a final confirmation, and I shit you not, a shadow figure waltzed his ass across the hallway. I then heard laughing from the kitchen, straight up laughing. Silent ass house, no noise, and I hear a male laugh clear as day. I then decide to run to the door and shut and lock it. I then sit inside the room, repeating the cycle. I, as a 19-year-old schizophrenic man, felt like I was going to actually die, and this wasn't one of my hallucinations, as I had taken medication, and a lot of it, before, and eventually at the time of 4 a.m., I fell asleep out of pure exhaustion and woke up at 11 o'clock. I then asked my friend who slept in the same bed if he heard anything. His response scared the shit out of me. He said, I heard and said all of it. I was just trying to act asleep to not be spotted by whatever demon was in that hallway or whatever. At the time, after we packed absolutely everything, we said duck you to the landlord guy and booked it out. We never should have done this job. This story comes from a man in North Carolina. I picked up a job doing HVAC, heating and air, installations right after high school. I enjoyed the job, more so the people I worked with every day, as we were all like-minded, didn't want to be here, and just wanted to go home to our families or, in my case, my dog. Not long after I graduated, my dad gave me an ultimatum: go to school or obtain a job, either way, you're not living off of me and my house anymore. I anticipated this moment. Throughout my life, he had frequently expressed sentiments such as, once you complete your education, you will need to leave, or you will experience the same independence and challenges that I faced. My father had a rough life as a kid. His parents abandoned him, leaving him to his grandparents to raise. According to my dad, he would have much rather been left on the street, and that's about as much as he would tell me. Furthermore, my mother was not present, as it seems she found it difficult to tolerate my father early in their relationship, which lasted approximately 9 months. You can connect the dots. It was about a year and a half into my career, and I was learning pretty damn fast, climbing the ladder from apprentice to being assigned to a designated crew in no time. I was paired with a guy named James. A good man that struggled with his moral compass, sometimes dealing with a split family and one of his own. The job in question started just like every other day: go to the office, pick up the equipment for the day, chit-chat with the other guys, and head to the job. It was a nice neighborhood, which was a relief, as the area we live in is 50-50 whether or not you're going to be jumped or tipped for your work. The house stuck out like a sore thumb, with overgrown grass, a decayed roof, destroyed decor in the yard, cracked concrete in the driveway from tree roots growing under it, trees forming a vegetated tunnel over the driveway, and a detached garage that looked as if it hadn't been touched in 20 years. James looked at me. Of course we get the one shitty house. Something felt off, I thought. Maybe their house broke, and they can't afford anything other than the house payments and pulled a loan for this job. I wasn't sure, and it didn't matter. We were here to do a job, get paid, and go home. Now something that stood out to me immediately was the windows were completely black, not a tinted black but solid black with no light in or out. I stayed at the truck as James greeted the homeowner. I looked over at him as he knocked on the door, and within seconds she answered but wouldn't open the door but maybe 4 or 5 inches, according to James. He came back to the truck and had an odd look on his face, one of confusion or disgust, I couldn't tell. She said to meet her around back, he said. This home was built on a very heavy grade, meaning the basement was a full size and easily accessible through a normal man door. James went around, and I began getting tool bags to carry around. As I walked around the corner, I noticed that there was music coming from the detached garage. Maybe someone's in there working on a car or something, I thought. I set James' tool bag down by the AC unit and went inside. Immediately I got a chill down my spine. It felt cold and eerie, and there was a musty mildew smell that just filled up every corner of this basement. James had a scrunched up nose and squinted eyes, obviously displaying disgust. The homeowner just went upstairs as I walked in, as I could hear her going up the steps. The basement was separated into 2 parts, a garage-type area where I was working with a wall cutting it in half from the other side of the door and a full wall separating the garage area from the living room area, which we'll get to in a little. I looked over at James as I set my bag down and asked softly, "Don't you have the creeps about this place?" He looked at me, nodded in response, and then went outside. It was time to start tearing everything out. Everything was going smoothly. I had already put the new furnace in its place and started attaching ductwork. There was a small fluorescent light that illuminated my workspace. Other than that, it was dark. I couldn't see past the light when I turned around, making the backdrop of the light completely black, making me feel as if I were in an interrogation room. I tried my best to stay focused. I went to cut a high voltage wire, and bam, sparks flew, and I jumped out of my skin. I could have sworn I turned all the breakers off. How could I have gotten the wires out of the old one without turning the breaker off? I mumbled. Because I tripped the breaker, the one light I had turned off. I shot up and went to reset the main breaker. I flipped the breaker, and the light came on, and as I turned around, I froze. The homeowner was right there. This had been the first time I saw her. She was pale, with absolutely no color to her skin, around 5 feet tall, in her early 80s maybe, and had wrinkly old skin that folded around her elbows and face like a Shar-Pei. All I could get out was hi. She scared the absolute shit out of me. She didn't say a word. She was hunched over a little and just looked at me, her eyes almost black. She grinned a little and turned away and went back upstairs. She made no sound as she walked, almost as if her feet weren't touching the ground. It spooked me. I had to take a break. I walked up to the van and sat down. "You good, bro?" James asked. "Yeah, I got to meet our customer." He just looked at me, eyes widened. "She's weird, isn't she?" he asked. I just raised my eyebrows in acknowledgement. I went back to work and got to a point I needed help with something and called our office to send a tech out to help us wire something up. It was around noonish, and I was ready to eat, so I ordered food off DoorDash, as I don't like leaving the job to eat. I hung out with James until food arrived, and we both stopped and ate. The whole time something felt off, like something was watching us while we worked. I felt like I could reach out and touch whatever it was even though I couldn't see it. Our tech arrived right about the time we were finishing eating. His name was Arnold. Arnold was a religious man like myself, and we connected on that. We often talked over the phone or text about things going on in our lives and what we could do to help ourselves with God. "What's up, guys? Didn't ask if I wanted anything to eat?" he said. "We didn't know you were coming, or we would've," James said. Arnold was kidding. He often used cliché humor. James stood up and started to brief him on what all we had left and also mentioned our lovely customer. He described everything to him, like her appearance, our interactions with her, and the feeling we get when we go in the house. Arnold shook his head and claimed we were a couple of chickens and we were scared of an old lady. James shrugged and said, "Okay, well, when you meet her, you'll understand." Up until this point she only spoke once as far as I'm aware, and it was to James at the front door. I went inside to grab something, I think my wallet, I can't remember, but something, and came out pretty quick. Arnold looked at James and me and said, "Let's get this done. I've got a couple of other calls after this." As soon as we stepped inside, something wasn't right. James led and looked down. Our tool bags were sitting by the door, perfectly packed and closed. I didn't move them and certainly didn't put all my tools up, as we weren't finished. Something didn't want us there, indirectly telling us to leave by putting everything together for us. Chills ran up my spine, but Arnold didn't seem fazed, acting as if we did this to try and freak him out, and he just walked right on past it and asked me where everything was. James came back a minute later, obviously startled, but just wanted to be done. "I'm going up to change the thermostat." Neither James nor I have actually been in the house. Arnold walked through the door, and inside of this second room were furniture and arcade machines all covered in clear dusty plastic just like in the horror movies. It was very dark in this home, we flipped switches, and nothing came on, so we resorted to flashlights. Arnold went up the stairs and called out, "Ma'am, we are going to put your thermostat up." No reply, but we could hear footsteps upstairs. I got about halfway up the stairs and turned around, paranoid something was behind me, and sure as the world, at the bottom of the steps, she was standing there silent, just standing there straight and still. Her pupils almost glowed with a tiny white light. Then it hit us all, a smell, one I haven't ever smelled, but it was potent. Arnold gets up to the kitchen and flips the switch for the kitchen, and a small overhead light over the sink turns on and buzzes, and it's on. I tapped on James' shoulder and whispered, "She's at the bottom of the steps." James' face turns pale. I knew what he was thinking. How long had she been down there? Was she hiding in that room? He leans over my shoulder and sighs, "Bro, no one's there." "What?" I thought I just saw her, and I turned around really fast, and he was right, no one was there. I look at him. "Dude, she was right there, I swear." About the time I said that Arnold has acknowledged someone. "Hey. You must be Ms. Brown." She was slouched over like an elderly person and replied, "Sure." I have honestly never heard someone reply sure to that before. "Well, I'm going to get this thermostat put up for you." I was still just shocked, she was right behind me, I know it for a fact. James and I walked the rest of the way up and stood in the kitchen watching them. She just stood there staring at Arnold. Now if you remember, I had mentioned the windows being solid black. Well, they were covered with industrial black trash bags, taped around the windowsill to lock out any other source of light coming in. The smell was still present, and I had never smelled it before. The odd thing was the house was clean, the tables and counters were all clean. Arnold finished up and turned to her and told her, "Well, you're all set up and ready to rock and roll." She just looked at him, a smile started to grow on her face that felt like it went up past her eyes. "How many kids do you have?" she asked. Her voice was strong but high-pitched, like a typical older woman's voice would be. "Excuse me?" he replied. "Well, there's Anne, Barbara, and Chuck." "But there's one more, isn't there?" Arnold was completely shocked and was extremely wide-eyed and looked at me and James. As far as I knew, he had 3 kids, and yes, those were their names. How did she know? She doesn't have any electronics, no cell phones or anything to look him up, like she could anyways, she's never met him, and dispatch doesn't give our names out like that. A darkness filled the room, it felt heavy, and my heart dropped. Arnold's wife is pregnant. I can feel her. What is her name going to be? Clara? That's what your wife picked out. She pointed and bounced her finger at Arnold. She looked at James, and he booked it down the stairs. He didn't want to know what this demented lady was going to say to him. She then slowly looked at me, and I'll never forget this till the day I die. "Marissa, Marissa, Marissa," she said. That was the name of my unborn child that died because of a miscarriage. I wanted to scream at her, but I figured she wanted a reaction out of us as she kept pushing. Arnold was silent, as was I. We both knew what was going on. Possession? Maybe a witch, who knows, but we have to leave. She never made an advance toward us like she wanted to hurt us, but her posture changed. She stood up straight, smiling wickedly, barely any teeth showing, but the creases of her wrinkly smile almost touched her ears. I made a break for it. I ran down the stairs as fast as I could, stumbling once. I speed walked to the work truck, where James sat in the driver's seat with both hands on his lap, pale and shaking. I'm sure I looked the same. I looked over at James and said, "Fuck this, go." Right as James put the van in drive, Arnold came running past the truck, got in his van, and sped off. We started driving away, and I thought to myself, did I get my tools? Was she really possessed? A million things ran through my mind in about half a second, it felt. It was the longest drive back to the office I've ever had. We didn't collect any money for the job, which was normal procedure, but we didn't care. The next day James called for a meeting with our manager and told him everything, from the comments she was making to not collecting money. Our manager looked at us and just asked, "So you didn't get collected?" James and I looked at each other, and James just asked, "Did you not hear anything else I said?" She knew Arnold's kids' names, man. He laid back in his cushy office chair and just said, "We'll have collections call her and finish it up, please just collect next time." Everything we had to deal with just felt like nothing to him. I suppose it did sound extreme and off the wall, especially towards someone that doesn't really have any religious or spiritual views. We heard nothing about her after that, no confirmation the money was collected, nothing. James and I are still good friends today, but Arnold, well, he quit about 3 weeks after, stating that he wasn't cut out for this trade anymore even though he had 15 years of experience. Arnold and I talk on occasion, but not about that day. I still see her sometimes in my thoughts or my nightmares. I'm still at the same company, but no one talks about this, just James and I. How I opened a portal to spirits one night. This incident happened on the White Earth Reservation. The town where this occurred sits atop ancient burial grounds. I have always believed in the spiritual world, I've astral projected, but I always kept my mind closed off to spirits. White Earth is known to have heavy spiritual activity and many hauntings. Here is my story. On this full moonlit night I was with a group of 5 friends, including myself. At around 2 a.m., we started discussing ghosts, and our oldest friend suggested that we go look for spirits in some of the known haunted areas. We were hyped and didn't think much of what we were going to do. We grabbed a rifle, and we all loaded up into the SUV. There is a trail called Tibbetts Road on the outskirts of town. There are 2 houses in the first quarter mile, and then it goes very deep into the woods for many miles. During the ride along the trail, we called out to spirits, yelled out the windows, and talked trash to any spirits nearby. We arrived about halfway into the trail at 2 old-time abandoned cabins located 15 feet from the truck, which were situated on the edge of a swamp. When I and the oldest friend, we'll call him T, hopped out by the first one, something went splashing into the water, we couldn't see anything. He walked over there and started shooting around with his gun, trying to humor us. The others would rather not hop out, and I was kind of spooked by the whole idea. We decided to leave, so we went a bit further by the second cabin to turn around. At this point I felt safe and opened my mind completely up to spirits. We stopped and looked towards the second cabin, which was further out. I had the front seat next to T. He said, "Do you see that? Back behind the cabin?" And I couldn't see anything. I focused my eyes and kept looking, and pretty soon this white figure appeared. I continued to look, and I saw a white creature peeking its head around the corner. It had an alien-type head and large empty eye sockets. It seemed like it was short or on all fours. It would peek at us and then go behind the cabin. It kept doing this for about a minute. In my head I was spooked and couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was trying to hop out and go see the creature, but I was panicking and said, "This is how people disappear." I finally convinced him not to go. As we started leaving the woods, this tiny and long fox-looking thing ran up beside the truck, ran in front of us, and then cut into the woods. At this point I started hearing chant-like music that was really soft, like women or children singing, and I had the feeling it was a death song. I didn't care, but I, being sober and very intuitive, started to pray out loud and try to block the song out, but I couldn't. We finally made it out, and I was relieved, but that experience and the feeling of safety made us want to look some more. He knew of a spot in the middle of town that supposedly had a bad spirit there. The background of this spot is, 2 people ended a 8-year-old and took her to this short trail, that connects from old powwow grounds to highway and is heavily wooded, and left her body. Within the past 30 years. Apparently a strong evil spirit now lives where her body was. This was T's past cousin, so he knew her name. We parked on the trail next to that spot, and I began to call out her name and say things like "Come play with us." All of a sudden, mid-level along the tree line, I saw 3 black flashes zigzag, and after the 3rd flash, something snarled and hit the rear of the truck. We got the hell out of there. The young teen guy behind me saw the same flashes, and we all heard the snarl/attack. The teen girl started crying. This is where it gets wild, and I feel like we were connected or opened a portal. At this point, the entire town appeared foggy, with a population of around 250. We made it through the trail and came to a turn on the highway that connects it. There is a big downhill open area that leads to a flatland swamp, and this is where a body was found about 6 years ago. We stopped and decided to look down there. Among the fog I saw spirits for the first time. There were 5 spirits standing in a circle, they are whitish. The spirits were smoky blue, human-sized, and human-shaped, with holes where their eyes should be. One of them noticed us, he would just turn and look at us. There were a few other spirits wandering around, and then there were these black ones that were bigger than human, and once they noticed us, they would start. As the black spirits approached us in a long, slow-paced zigzag fashion, I felt that their intent was evil, prompting us to decide to leave before they got any closer. We went to another swampy area, and I couldn't believe it, we saw more spirits and more of the black ones that would then start coming towards us. Around this time it was 5 a.m., and the sun was starting to rise. We went back over by where the little girl was ended, except we went on a trail opposite of the flatland swamp and the trail she died on. We had to walk, so we got out of the vehicle and felt safe, being that it was lighter out. Coming directly from where the thing attacked our car, you could hear an adult girl crying/moaning out loud, and it gives me goosebumps to this day. I am pretty sure it is the girl's soul or something sinister trying to mimic her. The next night I was at a different friend's in another town. He has a basement with no door in the living room, and his cat kept sitting at the top looking down as if something was there. It did that a few times. Then at 3 a.m. that night, exactly when the phenomena had begun the night before, I saw a black shadow moving along the wall towards the TV, with the cat chasing after it. As soon as it got behind the TV cut out to static, and we had to reset it. For the next year after all of this, whenever I would think of it, usually at night time, I would wake up the next morning with handprints on my wrist. Before I truly dedicated myself to prayer and purified myself of any attachments, this incident occurred approximately 6 times. Spirits are real, my friends. I know what we did was very disrespectful and disturbed the peace. I have grown in spirituality, energy, and wisdom since then. If anybody has insight, I would love to hear it. To my dismay, I found out that the house I lived at as a kid is believed to be haunted. Here's what my mom had to say about it. I've come to a point in life where my mom is trying to tell me all those family secrets I was too young to understand. Every weekend or so, we have these long talks. It was a bit off-putting at first, but I eventually came to value the anecdotes and lessons she gave me. They had the feel of bedtime stories, really. Only, the protagonists were now my family and people I knew, the implications of the events were very real, and the effects ranged from anger and laughter to nostalgia. Nostalgia. That's what I first felt when we talked about the old house, that building that has seen of late many changes in ownership and purpose, that building that is always closed and evacuated exactly after 10 p.m., that building with an old rusty plaque that dates back to 1810. That building was where I lived for most of my childhood. When I found out that many locals thought it was a haunted place, I was confused. My days as a child roaming its halls and corridors, whose height was unlike any house I have ever seen, were quite normal and fond to me. I had no memory whatsoever of anything paranormal taking place, not even the classic friend that was but a product of my imagination thing. Doubtful and sometimes mocking faces were the reaction to my uneventful experience. I had just ignored the matter up until my mom mentioned it at one of our talks. Did anything strange ever happen to you or my brothers? Nothing ever happened to me. That was my first question. And then my mom started from the very beginning. We arrived at the old house when I was about 6. Mom had truly struck a good deal. We would get to live on the ground floor of this massive, 2-story, beautiful house and pay a small rent if we agreed to help the cleaning lady with the first floor once a month. Maybe it was too good a deal to be true, actually. The owners did not care to mention it, but others warned Mom of the danger. The house was feared, hair being pulled by an invisible hand, footsteps on the upper floor, knocks on windows whose maker never showed up, stuff out of place, and the like. Those were boringly common tropes about haunted, old places, and people loved to talk even when they never visited the place themselves, my mom thought. So, she decided to take the offer, although not without a certain degree of dread. But, as papers were being signed and furniture being moved, something happened. A neighbor, an old lady that had, as Mom vividly recalled, the habit of looking behind you when talking to you, said, "You'd best be mindful of the girl. She's a devilish one, no 2 ways about it." And then the neighbor told the tale of a little girl that was buried within one of the walls of the house. Apparently, she had an accident, and, as a weird custom had it, she was made part of the building so as to make it stronger. As far-fetched as it seemed, my mom took note, perhaps out of fear for this crone-looking figure. But I believe it was mainly due to her strong instinct to protect the family now that Dad took off and ran. It occurred just a day before we slept for the first time at the old house. My mom went to the building all by herself, directly to what would be our washing room. She faced the wall inside of which this girl was supposedly lying. She said a prayer out loud, and then she whispered straight to the white, now turned yellow, peeled off surface. "We mean you no harm. We just want to live here like a true family, so please don't do anything to hurt us." Thereafter, she left our fanciest platter with some candy before the decaying wall, as well as a couple of votive candles. Our very first days at the old house have disappeared in the mists of our memories. If anything scary ever happened, it would have had to be minor so as to be eclipsed by all the great times we had. My mom always kept the girls' platter full of candies and desserts. Whenever she bought or baked something sweet, a bit of it went to the platter. Who would have imagined that I had to share with a ghostly presence? And that seemed to be the end of the otherworldly chapter. But, as we reminisced about the important things that transpired during those 6 to 7 years we spent at the house, weird anecdotes started to come to my mom's memory. Since the old house was huge, it became sort of a hotspot for both my mom's and my big brother's friends. We would have these big, albeit chill, parties every month or so. This always seemed strange to Mom. The house was well known for its paranormal happenings, so it would follow that, but a few people would want to come visit. Despite that, as I clearly remember, they did want to, and badly so. I like to think the ambience we created was usually strong enough to ward off any presence with ill intent. At any rate, on one occasion my brother threw a party in his own living room. Yes, the building actually had an entirely separate and independent small wing. It was late at night. Dudes and gals were dancing to my brother's DJ skills, but then someone came near to talk to him. It was a friend of his, and he claimed to have seen a kid using the rusty, creaking swing that was beyond my brother's place. He went to take a look from the window. The structure of the contraption could be barely made out. Indeed, the seat was moving to the constant creaks, but it was empty. My brother went out to the empty lot I used as a playground during the day. It was completely enclosed by tall, abandoned buildings, so at night the place looked as dark as some beast's throat. He called out to me. No answer was made, and the creaking slowly halted, so he decided to go look for me at Mom's wing, meaning the main wing of the house. Once inside, my mom ran into him, and he told her that the empty lot was a dangerous place for a kid to play at during the night. She was weirded out. "Dear, your little brother has been sleeping in his room since your friends arrived." He could not believe it. Together they went to pay a visit to my room, to which I answered with the kind of snoring one gets from sleeping too hard. "Then who was that kid my friend saw at the swing? I saw the thing moving on its own, I swear." Needless to say, the party moved to the main wing, away from the beast's throat and lit with those really old, beautiful lamps my mom still keeps around. A kid? It gave me goosebumps, although my curiosity was piqued. "But, did you yourself ever see this kid?" Again, she told me she didn't see anything at all. But she did start to remember the time an aunt of hers came by to the old house when we were away. Now, the main entrance to the house has practically stayed as it was during my childhood. A big, two-piece, black metal gate that was opened using a remote was how cars came to a narrow garden and then entered the garage. The gates had a metal netting at the bottom, and it reached low enough for anyone to clearly see the feet of people standing nearby at either side. It was a cool feature. As a kid, I liked to try and spot whoever dared to use the doorbell. This very doorbell was no doubt relentlessly pressed by one of my mom's aunts at a certain date. Apparently, she wanted to ask urgently about a piece of gossip. A pair of feet wearing kid shoes greeted her through the netting some minutes in. "Hi dear, is your mom home?" The voice of an infant gave a sharp no. "Well then, would you mind letting me in? I'll wait for her. When is she coming back?" In a hard to describe tone, the person on the other end said he admitted that he didn't know. "I'm locked up. I'm all alone. My mother left me here, and I can't get out." The woman felt pity for his grandniece and decided to stay put with him until his mother came home. After a few more minutes, it happened. My mom arrived in her old crimson Cherokee. She gave a honk when she saw her aunt, and they both entered the old house. Mom started to unload the groceries while her aunt talked to her. "How could you leave your son like that, all alone? He was very sad. Guess he went into the house." Mom suddenly stopped and frowned. "What are you talking about?" "He was with me all along." The trunk opened, and there I was, playing with some toys. My grandaunt was incredulous, so she grabbed me by the hand and touched my face, getting more and more pale by the second. She started to babble. "It's you, it's really you. You are here." We all went to the living room, but then I left to do something else. My mom told me that it took a couple of chocolates to get her aunt out of the shock. Of course, she now never dared to go even close to the old house, and soon all of our relatives followed suit. These are the most prominent stories my mom told me. Many other things happened, but they were much more cliché and rather short. But, according to my mom and the friends who were involved, they did happen. And, as if that wasn't enough, You've got some facts. The old house has never again been used as a house, only businesses have set up shop, but a lot of them have left rather quickly. Nowadays there is a restaurant bar, although I've heard stories that point to something weird taking place. At 9 p.m., all patrons are asked to leave, even during weekends. That's right. Keep in mind that most businesses of their kind make a lot of their profit during these crucial hours. A friend of the family had this evacuation happen to him, to which he asked why. One of the waiters told him that they all left the building before 10 p.m. because of the terrifying things that occurred after. Apart from that, let's not forget that the house is at least 200 years old or so. A faded plaque at the front says that the building is meant to honor some local cavalry unit of the Independence War. Frankly, I don't know what to think of all this. Maybe I should just let it go, as it really doesn't bother me and I can't remember anything weird happening to me. Nonetheless, I'm about to start an important chapter in life, one that may take me away from my hometown and friends for a long time. Wouldn't it be nice if I could look more into this so as to indulge in a bit of nostalgia and, just maybe, begin a journey of self-discovery? It is also intriguing to know why it is that all close relatives, meaning my mom, my brother, my sister, and myself, didn't have anything bad or scary happen directly to us? Is it because of the ritual my mom did regularly? What about the playful boy and the girl that was supposedly buried within one of the walls? Thanks for reading. As you could see, these are not exactly my experiences, but my mom's and some relatives. I only took a few liberties when it came to the dialogues, but I was true to the essence of what I was told. Hope it gave you the chills I had while listening to them.